What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto had a secret twin brother? And they both loved the same girl. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description to original creator of this beautiful creation. Naruto let out a loud yawn that was followed by a groan as he stretched his arms up and over his head. Joints popped and muscles burned with the stretch in a way that felt good after. He was so tired. The whole ordeal of meeting that team from Suna and finding out about the Chunin exams all of a sudden had really sent his head spinning. Not to mention that mission with those shoplifting brats from earlier, tailing them all day, it was exhausting. If Konohamaru and his friends ever did something like that, he wouldn't hold back, mostly because he knew they knew better than that. He was glad he had tomorrow and the next day off. He needed the break. All their missions might be low rank as of late, but they had been doing a lot of them and it was taking its toll on their team. The missions were both tedious and exhausting. The frustration from their situation was fueling the tension between Naruto and Sasuke, making things even harder. The fights between Naruto and Sasuke were becoming more heated and it was beginning to upset Sakura. So Kakashi-sensei thought it would be best for them to take a break for a few days before meeting back up for another mission. Naruto wanted an exciting mission, with real danger like their mission to Wave. He regretted the thought as he remembered the actual events. Naruto frowned sorrowfully. He thought of when he met Haku and Zabuza. That encounter had really changed the way he saw the world and ninja. The things that happened that day on the bridge could not be forgotten. He didn't talk about it or let it show, but the things that had been said about ninja being tools weighed heavy on him. He had always believed being a ninja was cool, glamorous even. Naruto's mind wandered to memories of the dark cell he had been raised in until he was 4. The nightmare men that had experimented on him, tortured him, while whispering in his ear that if he just broke and just gave in he could be the perfect weapon. But he didn't break, as hard as they pushed and bent him backwards, but they never got the satisfaction of hearing that resounding snap. Naruto had endured though it all, alone without any hint of anything left to live for. Then one day the bars of his prison was thrown open and the Sandame lifted him from the floor. He was 4 when he was finally taken from that place. Not liking his own train of thought, he tried to clear his mind and think about something else. Instead he thought about his meeting with the Genin team from Suna, the village hidden in the sand. They were in Konoha for the Chunin exams, they had said. They were a funny group and once again Sasuke had outshined him, and with a rock. Naruto scowled. The Chunin exams, huh? Sure sounds exciting. It would be a perfect chance to show off how strong I've gotten, too. He tried to think on the positive. So Sasuke had shown him up, but Naruto had been training very hard on his own since they got back from Wave. And now that he knew about the Kyuubi, he was starting to slowly figure out why he healed so quickly, why he never even had a scar. He knew he was getting stronger too, and it had nothing to do with the Kyuubi. If he just had the chance, he was sure he could kick Sasuke's butt. But then he thought of something else and frowned. I wonder why Kakashi-sensei never mentioned it to us. He must know about the exams, right? And it has to be happening pretty soon if we already ran into Genin from another village. Insecurity ate at him, making Naruto overthink, and when he overthought, the darkness at the edges of his heart would creep closer in and he would hear its voice. He doesn't believe in you, the dark, sinister voice whispered, as if someone was right at his ear, and it sent shivers down his spine. It was the Kyuubi. No, that's not true, he told the fox, eyes closed tight as he tried to push its voice back. His hand subconsciously went to press against the seal on his stomach, gripping the fabric of his jacket. Just shut up and leave me alone, and it did. For now. Naruto stopped and looked up at the sky, watching a flock of birds fly overhead. He noticed that the once earlier white clouds were colliding and sticking together, turning a frightening shade of gray. It was going to rain, and soon by the looks of it. Naruto looked around to see if anyone else noticed the changing weather and found that they had. Store owners were closing shop and pedestrians rushed home, some opened umbrellas that they already had. He watched as kids hugged their mother's legs and wiggled themselves under their father's jackets to keep dry. Some were out with siblings, chasing one another. Those with much older siblings were holding hands as they walked while their parents watched them with loving looks of adoration. Naruto felt a pang in his heart that he proceeded to ignore. It was an old, familiar pain that he had long learned to deal with. Once all the families and bystanders had left that street, Naruto looked around one more time before taking the red tube that hung from the shoulder of his jacket, plucking it free from the cords. He pulled the capsule apart into two and tilted one of the open ends until 6 blue and pink pills poured out into his hand, 3 of each color. Taking one of the pink pills between 2 fingers, he placed it on his tongue and swallowed. It took only a few seconds after the pill traveled down his throat before he was covered in a plume of smoke that rose from his feet to his head. When it cleared, Naruto was still Naruto, only he was a she. Her hair was the same sunshine yellow, but now the blonde tresses were down past her hips, her bangs long and infuriating because they fell across her face. Speaking of her face, it had now become fuller, her cheeks pink right under her eyes, which were bigger and brighter than before. Her eyebrows were slightly thinner while her eyelashes were longer and thicker. She was an inch shorter, another annoying part of being a girl. She was already small as it was. The explanation for this change was that Naruto had been born a girl. Unknown to her, the reason for the disguise was because the Hokage believed in order to protect her, having her live as the opposite gender would better hide her true identity from those outside the village and protect her from those inside as well. After her birth, tensions were high. The tragedy had brought the worst out in many people. Criminals and perverted degenerates thought to use the village's weakened state to commit felonies, while the Konoha police force were assisting in the reconstruction of the village even after years had passed. Orphans and young girls were large targets, and one so hated as Naruto would have the biggest mark on her back. Naruto was told the reason she had to grow up as the opposite gender was because it would decrease her chances of assault. That it was to protect her. She wasn't so sure that it did. Too many bad memories were proof otherwise. The pills she had taken were originally designed with the purpose to increase the time one could hold a hench for infiltration and spy missions. Using a mix of sealing and innovative science involving chakra, they were able to perfect an appropriate formula that worked with her unique chakra paths and had put her on a dose as soon as it passed trial testing. Afterwards, the Sandaime had arranged an apartment for her and she was given strict instructions that she was not to leave her home without taking a blue pill first, and that it was very important to keep her true gender a secret. After she had been rescued from the place, or what she had named the hell in which she had been raised at until she was 4 years old, she had stayed with the Sandaime for a whole year before the council stepped in. They all came together against him, believing that he should not be allowed to keep and raise Naruto. They blamed her for the Yondaime's death, and because she had been taken so young, and was tortured and experimented on by ninja still unknown, they thought she was too damaged and possibly unpredictable after what she had been through to be kept so close to the Hokage. In the case, she lost control over the Kyuubi. He had fought hard to keep her, but he was outnumbered in the decision by the council and was forced to set her up in an apartment all alone, with only the landlord to look after her and a scarecrow that popped up from time to frighten away the crows that might think to pick at her and leave her some vegetables. She never had much money, the council had their fingers in that too, trying to keep her cut off as much as possible. But once in a while the old man managed to get away and see her. He always found little way to cheer her up, and he made her laugh a lot when she was with him. Sometimes he would bring her to a safe spot, guarded by ninja she couldn't see, and he would allow her to take the pink pill and give her a dress to wear if she wanted. She felt a little weird when she wasn't used to it, but she would put it on because it seemed to make him happy. After, he would always find a flower and tuck it into her hair, and they would fish with their feet in the river. Sometimes nothing would be said at all, other times it was non-stop chatter between the two. Naruto loved those days, but there hadn't been many more like them since she graduated the academy. She got it though. The Hokage was super important and busy, she couldn't always expect the old man to be able to make time to come see her. Plus, she was a really busy ninja too. Naruto looked down at herself and thought of her pills. She had become exhausted of taking them and of waiting until the Sandaime thought she was ready to face the world as herself. He always told her that she was still not strong enough to handle it, both mentally and physically. But she was a ninja now, she had graduated the academy and gone on missions. Wasn't that proof enough of her strength? This thing about Naruto was that it wasn't even about being a boy. She wasn't like Sakura or Ino. She didn't like the things that they did or the things people assumed a girl should like. She didn't get the big deal about putting in the extra effort to look pretty or making sure your hair was brushed if it was just going to get messed up on a mission or in a fight. Maybe sometimes she might feel a little LNGING and jealously for what Ino and Sakura, heck even Hinata had, but she wasn't sure she wanted to be like them. She was pretty contact in her boyish habits. It suited her better than the makeup and pretty clothes ever would. It just wasn't her. Naruto liked working up a sweat. She didn't care if her clothes got dirty or hair messed up. She didn't have the same thoughts as some girls had running through their heads. She wasn't constantly worried about what boys thought about her. Just worrying about getting Sakura to like her even a little bit was super hard. Why did she need the extra worry about how a cute boy looked at her? None of them were as smart, or pretty, or had eyes that shined like polished jade like Sakura's did. What bothered her about living like a boy was feeling like she had no freedom. She was pretending to be something else and made to think that the reason for it was because being a girl meant being weak and vulnerable. That was just a bunch of crap. Naruto could kick just as much butt the way she was born as when she could after taking the blue pill. And then there was her team. She didn't like withholding the truth about herself. She had enough secrets locked away as it was that it was. How were they supposed to get along if they found out she had been lying to them all this time? She had nightmares about Sakura punching her, of Sasuke sneering and saying things worse than any insult he's thrown her way so far. She was scared he wouldn't look at her the same. That he would look at her the way he looked at Sakura and every other girl. She wasn't like that, she didn't think about him like that, and she wasn't some squealing girl who barely passed as a kunoichi. She decided she was done. Tomorrow, she would go and talk to the Sandame. Then the rain started. It began as a small drizzle and then in minutes it turned into a full-on downpour. It took only seconds for it to soak her to the bone, her clothes heavy and hair curling near the bottom from being wet. Yet for a minute, desire the downpour, Naruto just stood there with her face tilted up, letting the rain shower her. It felt good. Taking a deep breath, Naruto opened her eyes and gave a big grin before running the rest of the way, whooping when she spotted the shelter of the entrance to her apartment building. Getting inside, she shook herself off, shivering before hurrying up the stairs to her floor. She grabbed her keys out of her pocket, getting them ready for when she arrived at the door of her apartment. When Naruto reached her door, she gave a sigh as when she saw the fresh scrub marks and smudges of the hateful words that had been washed away. Naruto remembered the first time she woke to find her door vandalized with words telling her to die and calling her terrible names, written across the door. She had been 6, and the elderly landlord had found her scrubbing at the words with an old brush and dish soap. She wanted it gone before anyone saw, afraid of the neighbors' looks or getting charged by the landlord for the damage. But when the landlord had caught her in the act of cleaning, he had given her a look of pity before telling her that she could find paint thinner in the shed at the side of the building before leaving her alone without another word. It had happened again a few times through the years, either while she was sleeping or not at home. After a while, all the marker and paint had left terrible stains on the wood that would never truly go away. I'll have to repaint the door again soon, she thought. It was really the best way to erase it. She had probably painted the door every color of the rainbow already. That made her smile a little. Shivering again, her hands trembling with the chill, she struggled for a second to slide the key into the lock before she got it in, turning it and hearing the soft click as the tumbles turned and the door was unlocked. Opening the door, she quickly stepped into her apartment and shut the door behind her, giving out a tired sigh. She kicked off her sandals in the doorway and tossed her keys on the top of her shoebox by the door. Next, she took off her jacket and threw it over the back of her one lone chair at her tiny dinner table. That was when she noticed it was warm. She was sure she had turned off the heater, but there it was, glowing faintly red. She frowned and looked at the rest of her apartment, and immediately the difference in her apartment from when she first left it that morning. It was clean. Every surface had been scrubbed until it shined. Even the floors had been wiped down. The dishes had been washed and put away in the cupboard, her bed made, the table cleaned off, the trash was taken out, and all of her scrolls and weights that had been scattered and lying around the floor that morning from the days before had been picked up and removed from the main room, probably put back in her training room. The training room was a windowless room, almost the same size as the main room, that was once meant to be a walk-in closet to compensate for how small the rest of the apartment was. But since Naruto had no real need for such a large closet, she had converted it into a training room, building herself an L-shaped desk and bookshelf with some handmade motivational posters on the wall like, "Sasuke sucks, kick ass and work harder." She could only imagine how organized it must be now. It was usually a disorganized mess of scrolls, weights and weapons. Iruka-sensei must have come by. Naruto thought to herself. It was the only explanation for finding her room in such a clean state. He had a spare key to her apartment. Since she was an orphan, an academy sensei was given an extra key in case of emergencies. Iruka-sensei was the one who had gotten that responsibility. He was a huge mother hen, always lecturing and fretting over her. It was annoying for the most part, but it also made her feel oddly cherished. Sometimes she imagined that was what having a dad was like. Strange though, he usually left her some type of note to let her know he had been by. Curious about what else had been cleaned, she peeked into her bathroom, finding that too was spotless, even the toilet sparkled. Wow, she said impressed. She continued to enter the bathroom and turned on the shower before leaving again to get a change of clothes while the water warmed up. It could take a while, especially when the other tenants were running their own water. Since it was raining, she hoped that wouldn't be the case today. With a shiver, she went over to the heater to huddle close to its warmth a bit. Then she frowned. Iruka never left the heater on when he came by. He was terrified of starting a fire and always scolded her when he found that she hadn't turned it off before she left the house. It had been warm last night, so she hadn't turned it on then or this morning. If it was on, that meant whoever had cleaned her house wasn't Iruka. That didn't make sense, though. No one else had a key. Bang! The door of her training room swung open, hitting the wall with a loud thud, and 4 teenage boys squeezed out of the opening dramatically, grins on 3 of their faces, with their arms up in the air in some type of jazz hand motion. Surprise! They shouted. She was definitely surprised, so much she teetered back, falling on Hebet and hitting the small kitchen table. She gave a yelp as pain shot up from her tailbone before she stared at them stunned and scared, not recognizing any of them. What the hell? She yelped, her heart jackhammering in her chest as her eyes bulged. How did you get in my place? 2 of the boys, twins were at the forefront of the quartet, came forward. They both had bright red hair, like a tomato. They had an explosion of red hair. The 2 were identical. They wore similar outfits of the same colors. One had a yellow shirt under a baby blue hoodie with mint green pants. The same outfit in the same colors, but his hoodie was yellow and he wore it tied around his waist while his shirt was blue instead. They just kept grinning, looking ready to start vibrating with excitement. The tallest had the same red hair, but his was buzzed, a crimson shadow across his scalp. He wore a teal forehead protector with a swirl at the center around his head. Like the twins, he was dressed pretty casually in a white shirt that somehow looked big on him under a blue shingled vest. Somehow his outfit made him look younger than one might think he was. He also wore gray pants that made his legs look even longer and were rolled up at the ankles. His arms were bandaged from above his elbows to his knuckles. He was so freaking tall, it hurt Naruto to look up at him. The last one didn't have red hair like the others. He was blonde, just like her. His hair wasn't as long as the twins, and stylishly gelled up and had to be the most flamboyantly dressed one of them. He had on a very fitted, mauve-colored, collared shirt that had tan darker sleeve that stopped at the elbow and tan-colored short pants. They were so skinny Naruto thought only girls could wear them. He stood with his hands clasped in front of him and tears in his eyes while he looked at her. His eyes were big and amazed, like seeing her was the greatest moment. All 4 of them shared the same expressive violet eyes. And their skin had the same tan complexion Naruto did, thought he blonde on was a bit fairer. If she looked a little more intensely, it was easy to tell from their multiple features that they were related. Either cousins or maybe brothers. Why did you just jump out of my closet? She demanded, still on the floor. You're not happy to see us? The twins asked her at the same time, perfectly in sync as they frowned sadly at her. They were about half a head taller than her. You scared the crap out of me, she told them, her voice high. She was considering taking out a shuriken and throwing it into one of their cheeks, but she withheld herself. They didn't seem hostile, but they were definitely not from Konoha, which meant they could be enemy ninja. She didn't recognize the symbol on their forehead protectors, thought they might be rouges. Brother, I think this was a bad idea. The tallest of the 4 said, rubbing a hand over his head in a sign of discomfort. His voice was really deep and Naruto wondered exactly how old he really was. Nonsense, Taka. The point was to surprise her and we did. The blonde one said cheerfully. He smiled at Naruto. We didn't mean to scare you. I don't think she knows who we are, Aki. Taka pointed out softly, looking down at the other teen and then glancing apologetically at Naruto. Aki frowned and looked at her again, taking in Naruto's wide, startled eyes and skittish shifting. She wasn't just taken by surprise, she was actually scared of them. Taka was right, she had no clue who they were. But, the Sandame was supposed to tell her. We even left him a picture so that she would recognize us when we came out and be happy. Aki's face twisted into an angry pinched face, his nose scrunching up and eyebrows diving down, biting his lip and curling his hands into fists at his sides. This was going to be a perfect moment. I had it all pictured in my head. He pouted, annoyed and feeling cheated of the moment. We were gonna jump out, surprise her, and then she was going to run into my arms. Like she would ever do that. Naruto thought, glaring suspiciously at them. What a weirdo. What the hell is going on here? Naruto yelled at them. She still hadn't taken off her shuriken pouch and kunai holster. Her fingers itched to grab a weapon. Someone better start talking before you get hurt. Aki gave a frustrated sigh and then said to Naruto, his face smooth as he let go of his momentary anger and frustration. We're sorry, you were supposed to be told about us before you came home, so you would be excited when we popped out for the surprise. He waved his arms up and down at his side like a bird, his eyes turning into angry swirls as he mussed up his own hair as he let his aggravation get the better of him. He gave a weird scream with clenched teeth before blowing a raspberry, an array of expressions being used. Naruto tried to breathe while thinking about what she should say or do in this situation. Obviously they seemed to know her somehow, or at least they knew who she was. But how or why was the question that should probably be asked. No one told me anything, especially the old man, that's for sure. She said, trying to keep her eyes on all of them for any sudden movements. So why don't you tell me what I should know? Let's start with who are you? She tried to approach this reasonably, something uncommon for Naruto. Outnumbered, she was trying not to do anything to rash. Kakashi-sensei's voice in her ear telling her to be calm and not to just jump the gun like her usual self. It was hard to resist not beating the answers out of them like she really wanted to. Aki smiled, his mouth opening to answer her when the twins moved in front of him and took the spotlight. We're your brothers. The twins gave a joyful cheer, grinning like Cheshire cats. Naruto stared at them with huge eyes, the corners of her mouth twitching as if she were ready to laugh. They were crazy, absolutely crazy. Sorry, I think you have the wrong apartment. I think there's another kid who lives in the building, I'm not sure their room number though. She told them and started to get up, ready to show them out the door. No, we don't, Aki said softly to her back. You're our sister, you were born on October 10th, you're 12 years old and your name is Naruto Uzumaki. He said, and she looked over her shoulder to see him smiling. And I'm Nikki, the one with the hoodie introduced himself. I'm Mickey. We're 14, our birthday is June 20th, said the other one. The twins then looked at the other two to introduce themselves to her. Aki gave a cough, straightening out his clothes before proceeding. My name is Aki, I'm 17, my birthday is March 18th. He looked so happy, and Naruto didn't get why. She kept thinking he might break out into tears any moment. I am Taka. He looked ready to leave it at that, but the others looked at him urgently to go more. Taka signed. I'm 16, I was born April 23rd. Thanks for sharing, but anyone could know my birthday. That doesn't exactly prove you're my brothers. Something inside her was adamant of rejecting the idea for some reason. She was not falling for this. Maybe it was some type of pre-exam test. I don't know who put you up to this, but as a prankster I can tell you this is not funny, not even a little bit. She glared at them. Was it Kiba, that dog breath, dirtbag? Is this revenge for that time I got Shino to help me give him an Akamaru fleece? They shook their heads. Is Kiba a friend of yours? Aki asked curiously. No, he's just some stinking classmate. She slapped hand over her mouth. What was she doing telling him this stuff? Damn it, if it wasn't him then who? She turned and kicked the leg of her table. Was it the villagers? They sure got creative this time. Her shoulders shook and her toes hurt from kicking the stupid table. Damn it. She couldn't believe they managed to pull something like this on her. I'm so sick of all these villagers making fun of me, and now they're getting shinobi from other villages involved. Don't they have better things to do? She sniffed, and squeezed her eyes closed to keep tears from falling. She wasn't sad, she was just angry, super angry. Naruto, please just listen to what I have to say. Aki pleaded, reaching out and putting a hand on her shoulder, but she just jerked away from his touch. "Just get out of my apartment already before I kick your butts." She screamed at the four of them before she ran to the bathroom, slamming the door shut and locking it behind her. The room was already filling with steam now that the door was closed. Then she realized she had forgotten to grab a change of clothes. Quickly she unlocked the door and ran back out, grabbing a shirt and pajama pants from her dresser, running past the four who were still there in the process. She ignored them and went back to the bathroom. She stopped to shout before slamming the door for a second time. "You better not still be there when I come back out a second time, I mean it." Shaking her head, Naruto took a deep breath and sunk her fingers into her hair as she dropped it forward. Her neck began to hurt though, and standing in the steam was starting to make her sweat, yet for some reason she was shivering, her hands and legs shaking. This was just too much, their joke had gone too far. She tried to think happy thoughts, ramen with Iruka-sensei, the burn and ache after a long day of training, Sakura smiling at her, kicking Sasuke's smug butt. These thoughts helped distract her from what just happened as she stripped out of her damp clothes. She tossed them to the floor and practically jumped under the spray of water. She let out a sigh as she felt her skin once again become clean. She pulled her hair over her shoulders and did her best to wash the long, now heavy strands. Afterward, she just stood under the spray, enjoying the steaming water. She almost didn't want to get out, and when she did finally decide to step out of the shower, she felt and looked so refreshed. But somehow she felt even more tired than before. The hot shower had relaxed her and now she felt sluggish. She let out a loud yawn. Drying herself off thoroughly, she changed into the shirt and pajama bottoms she had taken earlier and then wrapped her hair up in the towel. Leaving the comfort of her bathroom, she expected and hoped for to find her apartment empty so she could go right to her bed and pass the heck out. But no, the four boys were still there, the twins sitting on her bed watching something that was playing on the small TV she had on top of her dresser. Aki was sitting at her table, looking sad and thoughtful, while Taka stood leaning against the wall between her fridge and bedside table, his arms crossed and his eyes closed. "Did you not hear me?" she asked them, getting their attention, and they all looked at the pissed-off little girl. "I told you to, get out," she screamed at the top of her lungs, not caring if the neighbors complained, and pointed to the door. She was so done with this day already. She just wanted to go to bed, pretend none of this ever happened, and start over tomorrow. "We're not going anywhere." Aki glanced up at her, the cold, fierce look in his eyes turning her to stone. "And why the hell not?" she growled. "Because we're not playing a prank on you, and this isn't some cruel joke someone put us up to. We are really your brothers and we won't leave until you believe that," he told her, and the two took part in a staring contest that had the atmosphere in the room crackling. Naruto didn't want to give in, she hated caving, she was too stubborn. But inside of her was the hope of an orphan, that her family would come for her, and it won out against her stubbornness. This time she was the one who stomped her foot like a little kid. Fine, she gave him a chance and hurtled question after question at him. "If you really are my brothers, then where have you been for the last 12 years? What about our mom and dad? Who are they? Are they dead? Or did you guys just decide you didn't want me?" She tried to keep the tremble out of her voice. But it was hard, especially when it came to thinking about her parents. "Of course we wanted you." Aki stood his voice an assuring shout. There was a bang through the wall from the neighbor's apartment, yelling for them to shut up. They ignored it, and Aki added more softly, "We thought you were dead." "Dead?" She gave him a disbelieving look. "What do you mean you thought I was dead? You were taken after you were born. Mom and even your Hokage didn't even realize it. Whoever had taken you, they replaced you with another infant. A dead one under some type of incredibly strong henge to look just like you. When Mom woke up in the hospital and asked for you, the nurse gave her the dead baby and we all thought it was you." He had only been a little boy, Taka and twins were toddlers at the time, but Aki remembered the blank, unbelieving expression his mother had made after she was given the baby to hold for closure. "We even burned the body," he told him, his eyes looking wet. Naruto thought about her dream, of that dark cell she had lived in and the one-eyed old man. Of the tests and abuse she had been at the end of. "I think someone did take me. But I don't know who." She swallowed the lump in her throat. I lived in a cell until I was 4. It's my earliest memory. It was dark and cold all the time and they did all these tests on me. I don't remember too much, I was really little. But I know by the time I was 4, I was with the Sandame. He took care of me for a little while before I had to live here." She wrapped her arms around herself. Aki was told by the Sandaime what happened to Naruto, who took her, and how he believed the crime was framed on another to take the fall rather than the real culprit. Without proper proof, the Sandaime could never bring the real criminal who hurt Naruto to justice. Aki would find that person, the man and all his pawns who helped him, and he would hurt them all just like they hurt Naruto. "So after you burned that other kid, you just left?" She wanted to hear more from Aki. "Yes. We had just lost Dad, and when Mom held that cold little body that she thought was you, she became hysterical with grief. It was the first time we ever saw her break down like that. She couldn't handle the immense loss and made us leave Konoha after." He told her, his eyes a storm of emotions, his sincerity clearly made out in his eyes alone. "Where did you go?" When Naruto swallowed, she couldn't say it. Saying it would mean she believed them, it would make this real. And she was scared to accept it was real just yet. "Where did you go when you left?" "We went to the land of grass, Mother had a sister there. We stayed with them for a while. But not even our aunt could console our mother." He told her, "But Aunt Ayuka had her own daughter. It was too painful for Mom to be around them, watching Aunt Ayuka with our cousin. We didn't stay long and we traveled all over after that. Eventually our grandmother learned that we had left Konoha and tracked us down. She invited us to stay with her." He told her, taking a seat again. "Our grandmother had been trying since the Eddie village had been destroyed to get us all back together while searching for a safe place to make our home again. She did." He smiled, and she could see it in how thin his eyes got, the crinkle in the corner that told her how happy the thought of his home made him. "By the time we went to live with her, she found a new land to make our own, and what we call New Eddie was still under construction." He told her, thinking of their travels, of their constantly depressed and distraught mother before they went to Eddie and found themselves surrounded by the love of a long-separated family. "The New Eddie village?" Naruto asked, never hearing of it before. "Yes, the Eddie village, or Uzushiogakure as some know it." He told her, "Like I said, the original was destroyed in the Second Ninja War, and it's nothing more than a small island of ruins now." He shook his head, remembering the stories and visits there. Their grandmother thought it was important to see what it had become firsthand, to teach them. Naruto frowned as she thought of something. "When did you find out I was alive?" "Only a few months ago." He told her, looking at her apologetically. "The old man didn't try to find you and tell you about me sooner?" She didn't want to believe he would hold out on doing something like that. "And if he had, why did he tell them now?" "I'm sure he tried immediately when he discovered you were alive. But our mom didn't want us to be found, so I'm sure it was very hard for him to even get a whisper of our whereabouts. Then, once we came to New Eddie, the entire island had been put under a powerful genjutsu, so that no one would have been able to find us anyhow for all these years." He sighed, thinking about the isolation they had lived in after they had went to live with their grandmother. It had been even more lonely as their mother had been struggling fierce depression still at that time. "Our grandmother wanted to make sure no one would know about us until she wanted them to, until she thought our village was ready. It just so happens that time finally came a few months ago when we publicly re-entered the shinobi world again. Now that we're out in the open again, your Hokage was finally able to get word to us about you, so here we are." He grinned and stretched out his arms in exaggeration. He looked ready to cry again, his eyes glistening, and it made her feel weird to see this stranger like this. "Here you are," she said, looking at all of them. "But what about my mom? Where is she?" she asked, having clearly seen no woman in her apartment with them unless she was still hiding in her training room, but she doubted it. She noted Aki's frown, and the dark looks that had shadowed the others' faces as well. "What is it? Did she die?" She swallowed the lump that had risen in her throat. "No, she's still alive," he told her with what he hoped was a reassuring smile. "She's still back home." Naruto found herself feeling relieved. She had started to think it too much to hope to meet her mom. To be hugged by her parents just once and be able to remember it when she needed it the most. You have to understand, after learning she had been deceived in such an emotional way, she's rightfully distrustful to just believe the Hokage. So she sent us with some others to confirm that he wasn't lying. Once we met you and we felt confident that you really are our sister, we're to send word to her and she'll come here herself to see you." Naruto could understand that. "And you really think I'm your sister?" she asked, holding her hands out to her side, even spinning around for them sarcastically. Obviously she was joking with them, closer to mocking really. "Yes. He gave a nod. We took special measures, of course. We set up special seals around the apartment to dispel any type of henge just in case you were another imposter, and we had some of our ninja follow and observe you as well. Naruto was not exactly thrilled at that bit of information. She really needed to focus on her sensing skills. She had no talent for reading the atmosphere and intent of an opponent. She wondered how close these other people had gotten to her without realizing it. And with that attitude, you are definitely a Uzumaki. Nikki spoke up. At least she assumed that one was Nikki, his voice teasing as he wore a huge grin that matched his twins. Mickey knocked his shoulder and the two laughed. Taka and Aki observed her next reaction carefully. Her face transformed with a multitude of emotions, her mind reeling with what she had just learned from them. Could all of it really be true? She wanted to be realistic, level-headed, to think clearly and make a good judgment, like Kakashi-sensei and Iruka-sensei had tried to teach her to do. But that wasn't her. She didn't think with her head like Sakura or even Sasuke. Naruto was all heart, and her heart wanted it to be true. It wanted to believe them so badly because even now, with her own teams, he felt so alone. It was just so crazy. She burst out laughing, bending in half with her arms around her stomach. She continued to laugh louder and louder until it hurt so much to laugh so hard. Then her laughing transitioned to sobs, dropping to her knees with her face in her hands. Aki was the first to go to her, cutting across the short distance between them in 2 strides and wrapping his arms around her, holding her tight against him. He had seen her mother break down so many times after they had left Konoha, and now his little sister was having her own meltdown right in front of them, and it terrified all of them. But unlike when they were kids, they knew now what to do to help. Aki whispered words of reassurance into the towel still wrapped around her head, promising it was all true, that they wouldn't hurt her and that it would all be okay. He wasn't sure if she even heard him over her own crying, but hoped his hug conveyed the same as his words. The other 3 joined them at their spot on the floor, each one wrapping themselves around her and each other. She was so used to being alone now, hoped for so long until she had to grow up, realize her family wasn't coming for her, that she had to stop asking about them and stop waiting and move on. She was angry at not being told about her family for all this time. Sad that all these years she had brothers and a mother really out there while she had been all alone. Yet here they were now, 12 years later, so much time lost but so much more ahead. She would never get that childhood back though, the one she should have shared with her brothers, and that fact tore her apart. Yet she was also insanely happy. She would never be alone again. She would have people who loved her and who there to welcome her home every day, just like she had always dreamed of. She was so scared it would all be a lie in the end, and it would break her heart for good if it was. She didn't dream of much at all, and when she woke up it felt like it had been too soon from when she had fallen asleep. In reality she had probably gone to bed pretty early, and when she woke the sun was up again. She must have cried herself to sleep in the boy's arms at some point, she just didn't know when. How embarrassing, Naruto thought, the tips of her ears getting red. It was even more embarrassing when she realized she was at the heart of a dogpile of teenage boys. She flung them off of her foot landing hard in one of their stomachs and sending them into her television. She gave a horrified scream at what she had done. It had taken her 2.5 years to save up for that TV. No, she cried horrified, stepping on the brother she had kicked in order to get a better look at the damage. The glass screen had been completely smashed in, spitting little sparks. My TV. Aw man, that sucks. One of the twins sympathized with her. He was hanging off the side of the bed face first, the other was all the way on the floor on his back, still snoring. We'll get you another one, Aki croaked at her feet. Apparently he had been the one she kicked. She jumped off him. I didn't think you guys would still be here. She blinked, her memory of the night before not coming to her all at once. Naruto thought maybe it had been a dream. Of course we're still here, the awake twin, Mickey yawned. We wouldn't just leave you after that cry fest. Naruto stopped to think for a second. I have 4 brothers and my mom is alive, okay. She thought, doing her best to remain calm. It was very hard, she was very excited if not a bit trepidatious as well. The small sensible part of her brain told her not to be so quick to believe them. She didn't have enough evidence and proof to believe what they had told her. Lucky for her, she had been planning to visit the Sandaime that day anyway, she could ask him. Plus she had a bone to pick with the old man for not telling her about her family. He would be able to clear this all up for her. Her brothers were all quiet, and she appreciated it for a moment. It had let her think. Shaking her head, she realized she somehow still had her hair wrapped in the towel from the night before. She quickly unraveled the twisted fabric from her head, tossing the damp towel on the floor near the bathroom door. Aki frowned at that. Her hair, now dry, fell in waves from not being brushed out sooner. She tucked it behind her ears and went over to her fridge and started pulling out the ingredients for her usual breakfast. She realized as she pulled out her breakfast that not only her brothers had cleaned her room, they had also went grocery shopping for her. There were eggs, a new carton of milk, cheese, fish. Some tomatoes were on the counter, and there were a number of other fresh vegetables and fruits as well. And when she opened the cabinet, there was a bag of rice that could be steamed if she had a rice cooker. She didn't. Naruto looked all the food with a new hunger, mouth-watering. She had never had so much food in her fridge before. In fact, there were days Naruto had nothing at all to eat. When she was little and had started living on her own, she wasn't given much money. Even when she did have some, there were those who wouldn't sell to her or only gave her what was rotten and expired. For food, she would sometimes go into the forest and pick mushrooms and sprouts, or maybe she would fish in the river. That's why she didn't mind drinking spoiled milk so much. It wasn't that bad because at least it was something. Unable to even think of what to make with all of the new ingredients, Naruto settled for her usual toast and milk as she initially planned to have anyway. She just added an egg to the toast since she had them. It was quick work frying the single egg and sliding it onto the toast. When her small plate was made, she turned around to take her seat in her only chair, and realized she forgot something. She looked at her plate and glanced at the carton of milk in her hand and then back at her brothers all staring at her. Oops, she thought sheepishly. Do you want some breakfast? I'm not a great cook though, she told them, putting her plate on the table. That's okay, we can cook, the twins and Aki said, their unison surprising her as they stood. Help yourself, you bought the stuff. She shrugged and sat down, watching them try to move around each other in the small space. The three arguing over what to make and who was going to do what. And despite the little room they had to move around, the three never bumped into each other. They easily moved around one another as if they had done this a million times. All the while Naruto munched on her toast and egg, staring at them. Taka had taken some of the bread from the counter and settled to make toast as well, joining her in a simple breakfast. Naruto gave him a shy smile as their eyes met. In return, he seemed to twitch his lips in his own version of a smile before it returned to a stoic line. He looked like a giant sitting on the floor, still taller than the table from where he was. She couldn't believe he was only 16. Naruto would have thought that he was the oldest of the four. She swallowed. She felt so awkward. She hated it. She wasn't normally like this. Swallowing, she tried again. After I'm done eating, I'm going to go see the Hokage. I have something I want to talk to him about. And no offense, but I would feel better if he confirmed what you guys told me. She told them quickly, taking a huge bite out of her toast right after she was finished talking. Aki looked at her sadly. She still didn't believe them completely. But that was okay, he should have expected as much. He gave her a small smile and a nod before asking if it was alright if they went with her. Naruto didn't see why not, so she told them it was okay with her if that's what they wanted to do. After Aki and the twins finished cooking their own breakfast, the twins took to eating on the edge of the bed and Aki stayed to eat leaning against the counter. Naruto licked her lips as she peered at what her brothers were eating. It looked really tasty. What is that? She asked them, pointing to their bowls. It's just grilled mackerel on top of bean sprouts and sliced pan-seared celery, daikon, carrots and mushrooms. Usually we would have rice, but you don't have a cooker. The twins shrugged as if it wasn't much. Naruto was impressed though. It was better than anything she could make. It looks good, she said out loud, eyeing the bowls. Then I'll make you some. Aki jumped to the task before she had time to protest that he didn't have to. She glanced at the other three. They gave her little shakes of her head, as if telling her not to even try to stop him. So she didn't and just sat back and let him cook. You really could tell just by looking that he seemed to be at home in the kitchen. He moved like a dancer would on a stage, each move a precise rehearsal of movement. It was kind of mesmerizing. She opened her mouth to ask about it a few times, but she closed them back up each time. She didn't get why she couldn't bring herself to ask. She had never had a problem blurting things out before. A little while later, but not much, Aki had put a bowl in front of both Naruto and Taka. "Well, eat up you two." He smiled, standing proud with his hands on his hips. Taka looked at him, eyes unreadable to Naruto but not to Aki. "Don't look at me like that. You should know better than to think I would just let you eat toast for breakfast. You're still a growing boy after all," he said and leaned forward, rubbing his hand across Taka's fuzzy head. Naruto let her eyes go wide. "How much more could he grow?" "I don't think he's gonna grow anymore, Ni-san," said Nikki with a snicker. Even Naruto gave a giggle. Taka gave an embarrassed grumble. "What? I'm your big brother, I'm supposed to take care of you when mom's not around, and part of taking care of you is making sure you eat right," he said matter-of-factly. "Yeah, but you also sneak us snacks when mom's not around, right?" the twins asked him hopefully. "Of course." He gave them a wink. "Which I'll buy you later if you four are good when we go into the village." Naruto rolled her eyes and picked up the chopsticks and started to eat. It was good. Like, really good. It must have shown on her face because Aki was speaking up again. "I'm so glad you like it." Aki cheered and wiggled like a hyperactive worm. "Even when you eat you're adorable." Naruto wasn't sure how to react or respond to him at all really. Usually she was the loud one, the stupidly cheerful and annoying one. It was very strange to have the coin flipped to the other side. "Aki, you're being weird again," Mickey chimed in, giving his older brother a look of warning. But, his lip wobbled and eyes got big and watery like he was about to cry. "You're going to freak her out and she's not gonna want to be our sister." Mickey shook his head and then gave Naruto an apologetic look, eyes big and begging for some understanding. When she was done with her food, she thanked Aki and helped clean some of the dishes before she told them she was going to get dressed. She saw that her jumpsuit from last night was hanging on the string outside her window. One of the boys must have hung the jacket and pants up to dry before they had fallen asleep. She stared at the clothes, contemplating. She loved her jumpsuit. It was a little big but it was warm and soft from years of wearing it. She thought to pluck the articles from the cord. But then she decided against it. Today wasn't just about her brothers, it was about coming out, being herself in all entirely. So she went to her dresser instead and pulled out a pair of denim polka-dotted shorts that she hadn't worn in forever, and a pale pink shirt with a bunny on it that the Hokage had gotten her one year. When she put them on later she found that they were a little tight on her. That shouldn't have surprised her though. She didn't have too many girl clothes, or that many clothes in generals. Really it was just her jumpsuit, a few shirts, some old capris, hoodie and pajamas. Over her shoulder her brothers took notice of the sparse fillings of her dresser drawers. They silently schemed to remedy that at a later time. Now it was only her long hair that was going to take her forever. She liked to at least comb it out before she took her pill and went out. Sometimes she would braid it over her shoulder. It wasn't like anyone was going to see it, but it was useful to have it tied back for when she took the pink pill and didn't have to worry too much about it after. With her brush in hand, she walked out of the bathroom ready to follow her usual routine only to be reminded that wouldn't happen when she nearly stepped on a piece of her broken television. Usually she would put on some funny game show or morning cartoon while she brushed her hair out. But that would not be the case anymore. With a disappointed sound, she stood staring sadly at the mess while she pulled her hair over one shoulder and began to brush through the knots and tangles. Her hair was nice, but it was a bit dry and split from not taking the proper care of it like Sakura and Ino did with theirs. The only reason she let her hair get so long was because the Hokage had told her once, given her probably the only other information about her parents that wasn't they loved her, was that her mother had very long hair. So Naruto had grown hers out, not for some boy or two look pretty, but because she thought it would let her feel closer to her mother. Naruto grunted and growled in frustration when getting to a particular bad knot in her hair, trying to force the teeth of the brush through the strands, only to yank at her hair painfully and causing her to hiss at the sting of it. She really should just chop it all off, it would be a lot more convenient. Maybe after she met her mom, she thought to herself. It got her thinking then, about both her parents. Who had the red hair and who had the blonde? Did she have her mom's eyes or her dad's? Did either one have the same marks on her cheeks that she did? What did they look like? Maybe she could ask her new brothers for a picture. Do you need help? She jumped like a startled cat, looking at Aki with wide frightened eyes for a second before they shrunk to normal and she relaxed. Huh? She didn't know what he was asking about. With your hair, I mean. He pointed. I'm pretty good at. Naruto looked down at the thick mass of yellow hair. It was going to take her forever at this pace. She nodded. What harm could it do more than what she's already done to herself over it? Take a seat? He asked before taking the hairbrush from her. It was a weird sensation to have someone else brush her hair, but not entirely unpleasant. In fact, it was kinda nice. She nearly dozed off, and when she felt Aki's shift behind her, she finally looked back at him. She touched her hair, feeling what he did. Getting up from her seat, she rushed to the bathroom to take a look in the mirror. Wow, she said. Aki had put her hair up in a sock bun, with a rope of hair wrapped around the base and twisted into an actual bow at the side of the bun. It was super cute. How on earth did he do it? Looking at it, she felt like it was so much more elaborate than it probably was. She tilted her head in a few different angles to get a better look at what he had done. You could see her whole face this way, all of her hair pulled back. Most of the time she only saw her face as a boy's face, but now, no one could ever doubt she was girl. She felt her face, soft and smooth, her eyes seeming almost too big with no hair falling across them. Was she pretty? For a second, looking at her reflection, she felt like she was. Naruto turned around to look at her brother, who was waiting expectantly for her reaction. Thank you, I really like it. She smiled, not a heartfelt grin, but a half-unsure smile that somehow still made her brother swoon a little over how cute she was. You're welcome, he threw himself at her, scooping her up and swinging her around in his arms. Oh, you're just the cutest, no one has a cuter little sister than me, he squealed. Naruto had no idea what was happening. Aki, no, the twins scolded him, as if he was some misbehaving puppy. Mickey stood and found a scroll and began to swat it down on Aki's head like he was a dog that had made a mess in the house. Bad, Aki, put her down. His little sister complex is kicking in again, gross. Nikki cringed, keeping his distance as if he might catch whatever his brother had. Come on, Aki, let go. We talked about this. Nikki sighed. You're going to scare her off if you keep this up. Let her go. Mickey tried to reason with their older brother. Don't wanna. Aki held her even closer, glaring at his little brothers. He had missed out on so many years to dote on his baby sister. He had to make up for it now. Let me go, you weirdo. Naruto said as she struggled to get free from him. Didn't you just do my hair? You're going to mess it up. You're right. He mumbled sadly with a wobbly lip and lowered her to her feet. Oh, look at those rosy cheeks and big eyes. You are just too cute. He told her, hand clasped in front of him to keep himself from reaching out for her again. What the heck? Naruto wheezed, hands on her knees as she tried to catch her breath. Sorry, he has problems. Mickey told her with a shrug. Yeah, he's weird. Has a serious little sibling complex. He was the same when we were little until we started to pull pranks on him. That got him to back off. Nikki told her with a wink and grinned almost cruelly at their older brother. Aki glared and pointed finger between the twins. You two were adorable, now you're nothing but twisted heathens. Nikki and Mickey looked at him innocently, as if they had no idea what he could possibly be talking about. Naruto looked around the three at Taka. He just shook his head. Keeping quiet, possibly for the best. We should get going, Naruto said, glancing at the clock on her bedside. It was late morning, getting close to the afternoon. Then let's go. The twins and Aki cheered as if they were going on some adventures excursion. Naruto rolled her eyes and stopped as she grabbed her sandals. She put them back down in their box and pulled on her pink boots instead at the door, happy to find they still fit comfortably. She grinned, happy. Outside though, Naruto felt nervous walking around in her own skin. She felt anxious, practically bouncing up and down as her eyes flitted everywhere, waiting for something. She was so used to the glares, the hatred, but walking through the roads now, people glanced at her as if they had no idea who she could be. She wasn't invisible, she wasn't hated, she was this new mystery that they had yet to realize was the fox child walking around. But she knew, when they realized who she was again, it would go back to how it had been before. I wonder if I can really do this, she suddenly said, and they all looked at her for explanation. Maybe I shouldn't. Aki cut her off, turning all the way around to face her and put his hands on her shoulders to hold her up. You have every right to live as who you really are, Naruto, no matter your gender, the color of your skin or who you love. No one should feel like they have to hide, even it's to protect themselves, because when you're older you're going to regret going along with it. It was clear enough that this was more than some brotherly wisdom. He was speaking from some type of experience, be it his own or from watching someone else's. She didn't question it, just listened. You are doing the right thing and we are going to make sure that you will always feel safe to be who you are, even if you don't know who that is yet. He smiled, big and encouragingly. Okay, he asked. Okay, she nodded with a swallow. Aki kissed her head, and then returned to leading their little group with Taka. This village is so different from ours, Mickey said from observation. What's your village like then? Naruto asked him, grateful for the distraction. Nikki grinned, taking over some for his twin. Well, our architecture is pretty traditional. It's big, but the buildings aren't as close together as here, they're spaced out, people have more land and property. We do most of our own farming, so we don't rely on outside sources much. Our soil is incredibly rich and fertile. It's a large island with a flourishing village to be proud of. And he sounded proud too. We have a lot of temples and priests. Our clan and the Eddie village have very deep Shinto roots, which you'll see evidence of all around our village. Our clan alone having been one to produce hundreds of powerful priestesses before we started pursuing the ninja arts. Mickey gave her a little lesson. Shinto? Like the gods and stuff? She asked the twins. In the land of fire, there was a large temple, the Fire Temple. It was a ninja temple that housed monks. She remembered a lesson in the academy about them. There were a few other religious shrines that could be found, but none as famous. It was hard not to believe in gods when she had a demon sealed inside of her. If demons existed, it made sense there would be gods. She was sure there were temples and religious followings in other villages too. What scared her the most about demons and gods being real meant there was the possibility ghosts were real, and Naruto was terrified of ghosts. The thought made her skin crawl. Yeah, the ones that we summon are pretty cool, but others have some nasty tempers. That's why the offerings we give them are really important, Nikki told her. Naruto blinked, not sure if she had heard him right. You can summon gods. Naruto's voice was a little too loud, unable to keep the disbelief from her voice. Not the gods themselves, said Mickey. That's impossible. The Uzumakis aren't just famous for their sealing techniques, but their summons as well. A long time ago there was a high priestess or priest that we called the summoner. They could summon the gods' eons, Mickey explained to her. What's an eon? Naruto tilted her head in question. I guess it's another word for familiar. Eons are beings conceived from the gods' powers and perform various functions for us in their stead. The Grand Summoner is said to be able to call all 9 of the legendary eons. Mickey said excitedly. Now, though, they are called the tailed beasts, the Biju. There are other eons as well, ones supposedly even older than the tailed beasts. We only know about those ones from books. The tailed beasts. She had one of them inside of her. She couldn't imagine summoning it from inside of her out into the world. How could you even control it? Can you tell me more? She asked, and the twins nodded. Happy to do so. Thousands of years ago, when the world was called something different from today and before the rise of shinobi, each great land had a summoner who was entrusted the protection of their people by whoever their ruler was. Nikki spoke like a born storyteller. Mickey took over. Each one would go on a pilgrimage to the temples of other lands to pray to the eons. If the eon thought the summoner worthy, a contract would be made out between them. The pilgrimage also helped to keep good relations between everyone. I've never heard of summoners. Are any still around? She asked, trying to search her brain for any mention of them in the academy. It would be so cool to meet someone like that. Naruto was startled when Aki answered. Not sure. The last summoner I know of came from our village. She died and the eons never appeared again. He glanced back at them. Without the contract of the eons, we couldn't summon their powers to help us. That was when they ceased being eons, and became the tailed beast independent from a summoner's will until they grew wild and we had to house them inside living vessels. Naruto took a sharp breath, trying not to reach and touch the seal she knew was on her stomach, to scratch and grip at it. Did her brothers know about the 9 tails? Would they still be so open to her if they knew? Who was the last one? Naruto asked. Aki smiled. Her name was Mito. She was married to the first Hokage. When the eons stopped forming contracts with humans, she had to become the Jinchuriki for the 9-tailed fox. No one remembers the summoners anymore or their sacrifices. Taka contributed at last to the conversation. That's so sad, Naruto said, looking at the ground, trying to imagine the people that had been these summoners. They kinda sounded like a cage, in that they protected their villages and ensured peace between the lands. Yes, it is. Aki agreed with a sad smile before grinning. But Eddie hasn't forgotten them, and so we still hold good relations with the gods and pray they're taking care of the summoners' souls. The gods come to visit us mostly when they're bored. Nikki told her with a grin. Some are pretty funny actually. Apparently there's not a lot to do in heaven. Huh, she would think the gods would be busier than to spend any time on earth. Silence fell again, the conversation coming to an end. And though the boys didn't seem to feel the weight in the air, Naruto did. She tried to think of something to say. She would have thought her brothers might have more to ask or say, seeming so enthusiastic to meet her. So, do you have a picture of our parents? Naruto asked, really hoping they did. Yes, we have a few. Aki smiled wide, so happy. Reaching into his back pocket he pulled out a picture. This one is my favorite. He told her and handed the glossy paper over. The picture was a 6x4, old and wrinkled at the edges but obvious, well taken care of. In the photo, a pregnant woman, with long red hair, sat in what looked like a yard under a tree on a blanket. Two little baby boys with red hair, who Naruto guessed were the twins, slept in her arms. A little blonde boy, who could only be Aki, was crawling up the back, none other than the fourth Hokage. A younger, little Taka was walking toward the blonde man, his face incredibly serious for a toddler. The only thing that stuck out to her in the photo was the man. She looked up sharply, her eyes landing on the last carved face in the Hokage mountain. No freaking way, she breathed. Nah, this is not happening, this was far too much. There was just no way the Yondaime, her hero and the man who sealed the 9 tails inside of her, was her dad. Her brain just could not handle that information at the moment, so she looked back at the photo in her hands and focused on the woman. She was beautiful, and she really did have such long hair like the Sandame had told her, cascading down her back and pulling around her on the blanket. It was the only photo Mom took with her when we left. The rest are probably still in our old house, in the album. The other photos I have on me are of just the 5 us. Aki told her, just in case she asked for another one with a better close-up. What house? She felt her heart crumbling in, envisioning the home that came with the yard in the picture, the place she could have grown up. She regretted asking about it. She had a feeling the more things she found that she could have had, the more all of this was going to hurt her and make her bitter. The one we used to live in. I don't know if they sold it off after we left, said Aki, looking in what Naruto assumed must be the direction the house was in. I want to ask the Hokage about it when we see him. Right now we're staying at one of the inns. Naruto looked back at the picture. It must be the backyard. Our mom is really pretty, Naruto said, her voice soft and eyebrows furrowed with emotion. Who took the picture? Jiraiya-san, I think. Aki scratched at his neck, a concentrated squint to his eyes as he thought about it. I can't remember too well. I was so little, it could have been one of Dad and Mom's friends. Who's Jiraiya? She didn't recognize the name at all, but that should be expected. Our father's sensei and your godfather. Dad named you after the protagonist of his first novel. He really loved the character. Naruto blinked. A godfather and her dad's sensei. Signature to Naruto, her first thought about this Jiraiya was that he must be really strong to have been the Yondaime's sensei. She remembered her dad was the Yondaime. Her dad was the man who had sealed the 9 tails inside of her. It was because of him that no one could love her. Why they blamed her while he was hailed a hero for saving the village and ruining her life, his own daughter's life. How could he do something so horrible? Didn't he know how she would be treated, or at least assumed what everyone's reaction to her would be? Naruto had at times felt resentment towards the Yondaime, but this made it 100 times worse. She wanted to smash his face right off the monument. Naruto took a deep breath then and tried not to think about it anymore. She would do that later, when she had more time to herself to really absorb this very big and important detail of her life. After being alone for 12 years, Naruto had become more accustomed to dealing with her problems by herself. As she looked at the broad backs of her brothers, she decided to keep it that way. She didn't want to burden them with this, or explain why it was that she was so upset with their father. If she could help it, she didn't want them to know about the Kyuubi, to have them look at her with the same eyes everyone else did. Maybe it wouldn't be so bad to let them dote on her. Everyone looks so happy, though I can't tell with Taka. Naruto gave a little laugh as she looked at the picture. Stealing an upward glance, she caught a tick in Taka's jaw at the comment. She wasn't sure if it was from annoyance or amusement. Taka's always been like that, he gets it from grandmother. Even when she's happy you can never tell. The twins told her. Wow, I just keep gaining relatives. She said, grinned, amazed. You would be surprised how many you actually have. Aki told her, wearing a huge gleeful grin. Well, how many do I have? She asked, her arms going up. I'll let you find out for yourself when the time comes, he said, wagging a finger. When they got to the Hokage Tower, Naruto knew what to expect and ran headfirst inside, waving cheerfully at the receptionist while going straight for the stairs despite the protests of the receptionist, who after only 3 seconds sat back down with a sigh. She was used to Naruto barging in to see the Hokage without notice or appointment. Naruto may look different, but no one else would just run up the stairs like Naruto did. The boys apologized to the receptionist for her before chasing after their sister. When she reached the old man's office, it was Rado Namiyashi that stood at attention in front of the door. He gave her a withering look when he saw her come around the bend and gave a sigh. He didn't seem too surprised to see her looking the way she did. Annoyed if anything. Naruto, how many times do we have to tell you that you can't just come visiting the Sandaime whenever you want? He's very busy right now, he said, annoyed. And what are you doing out without being under your henge? You know you're supposed to take your pill before leaving your home. He scolded her. Yeah, I know, and that's what I'm here about. I'm not gonna take my pills anymore, she told him, face serious. Rado wasn't mean to her, but he wasn't the nicest either. He took a more neutral and indifferent ground with her for the most part of their interactions. He had a very methodical way of going about his life, it seemed. Naru-chan, wait for us. Naruto recognized unison ring of the twins' voices already. Rado looked past Naruto to get a look at her accomplices and went pale at the sight of them as they came around the bend of the hall. He recognized them, even as teenagers. It was hard to forget faces he had seen as often as that of the Yondaimes. Rado was a teenager himself when he joined the honored ranks of the Hokage Guard along with Genma under the leadership of Iwashi. The Yondaime's children were always brought to visit him with their mother, Kushina. He had seen the children often before they had disappeared with their mother. He had heard they had returned, but this would be the first time he was actually seeing them again. Some were taller than him now. It was a shock. Rado felt a sense of pride in how big they had gotten. He felt torn seeing them again. He felt that by not being with the Yondaime the day of their sister's birth, the day the village was attacked by the Nine Tails, he had let them down. They were supposed to protect the Yondaime, and yet they weren't even able to fight beside him. No, all the younger shinobi, Hokage Guard or not, were brought to a secure location so that the next generation might survive the catastrophe that was the Nine Tails. You knew about them? She asked him, the boys still behind her. Rado bowed his head. His answer was clear. I know I have not been the kindest, but that doesn't mean we haven't been watching over you, Naruto, ever since your father. It's okay, she said quickly, cutting off the end of his sentence. She didn't want to hear about her father right now. I really do need to see the old man, Rado, she said again. Yes, I guess you do. He stepped aside for her and let Naruto enter the office, each one of her brothers following after her until they all filled the room and Rado closed the door behind them. The door swung open with abandon, slamming into the wall and probably leaving a doorknob-shaped dent. It was not the first hole in his wall made by Naruto, and he would have replaced the door with a sliding one if he wasn't sure that Naruto would most likely break it off the tracks on her way in. He wasn't even surprised. After so many years it was hard to be when he knew Naruto so well. Still, he had so much work to do and let out a frustrated sigh. But this time the reason for her barging in was more important than any other time, he thought as he watched Naruto's brothers file in after her. He had planned to visit her personally to speak with her about her family, but that morning a number of genin teams had arrived, and he had to see to all the Junin senseis. It was customary for visiting ninja, especially for such a large event such as the Chunin exams, to make an appearance in front of the cage before proceeding with any further action within the village. He could not turn them away. By the time he was done he had to meet with the team leaders of Konoha's participating genin for their nominations. He had his hands occupied with the paperwork part of it and he never managed to have the free time to go and see her. Hiruzen looked at the space in front of his desk and wondered if he should call Rado or someone else to bring some chairs in. He was not sure how long their discussion might last. There were a great number of things to be covered between them. You better start talking, old man, Naruto yelled at him, folding her arms across her chest and glaring. He tried not to smile. She looked cute with her hair up, so unlike the times, he's gotten to see her free of the henge. She was always a mess of tangled hair and ill-fit clothes those times. Her angry stare reminded him of her mother. He ducked his head and allowed himself a small quirk of his lips. Growing old was making him sentimental. Smoothing out his face, he cleared his throat and looked back up at the young girl and the four brothers behind her. "I apologize, Naruto. I know why you are here," he said with an apologetic smile. "It was my full intention to speak with you before you met your brothers, but I'm afraid I got caught up in my duties." He smiled, turned hopeful, and he changed the topic slightly. "Have you been getting along with your brothers?" Naruto didn't answer right away, seeming to think over her anger at him before she finally dropped her arms to her side, her brow as her boiling eyes came to a simmer. "I guess," she shrugged and rolled her eyes. Hiruzen chuckled. "I'm happy to hear that. But it was never that easy with Naruto. I's super weird," she admitted, throwing her hands up in the air before she started to pace and pointed at the four. "They're super weird." Aki looked hurt. Now, Naruto, you're a bit eccentric yourself." He tutted around the end of his pipe, a seeming constant thing between his lips. "I don't know what that means." She pouted, puffing out her cheeks. Was eccentric another word for crazy? Eccentric means strange, he explained, letting out a long breath through his nose as he leaned back in his chair. Naruto wasn't even thinking about that anymore. "I'm not strange," she huffed. She thought she was pretty ordinary. Besides the obvious differences between her and others, she didn't think that she was strange. He raised an eyebrow at her. "Strange isn't always bad. You're different, you have a big personality, and do your brothers." She stared him down. He frowned as her eyes went hard. "I asked you, old man, I asked you so many times about my mom and dad. Over and over, I begged and never got an answer. Some days I imagined they were dead, or on worse days that they just didn't want me." She squeezed her eyes shut, her hands tightly balled at her sides. "I am so sorry I made you feel alone and unweighted. Your parents did love you, and that I couldn't tell you. If I gave you even the smallest bit information, I knew you would hunt the rest of the story and endanger yourself." "Bullshit," Naruto cursed, and Aki opened to scold her, but the Hokage raised 2 fingers and he stepped back, staying silent. "If you just told me that, I would have been okay. I just wanted some hope that they had cared to hold on to." She was so mad, she wanted to scream, but her voice came out surprisingly soft. "Everything I have done for you has been to protect you, even if it might have also hurt you in other ways." He frowned. He stood then, and walked over to where the portraits of the previous Hokages were mounted in a line on the wall, looking over their stern faces and stopping at the fourth. The twins had Minato's wild hair, Taka had his strong jaw, Aki had his father's eyes, and Naruto had his slim, delicate nose. "Naruto, if anyone knew you were the Yondaime's daughter outside or even inside of the village, you would be in constant danger from the enemies he made in his lifetime. And there are still many of them, I promise you. Even your brothers have been targets for many schemes against your father." He told her, both to explain and as a warning for the future. Why you have your mother's name? For those who knew of the Uzumaki, I hoped that when they heard your name they would respect your clan's legacy enough to leave you be. So many have already forgotten that war and who the Uzumakis were. It felt safer for you to hold on to that much of your family. Still, you've been alone all these years. Your brothers had your mother to protect them when they were little. They could afford to know who their father was and have his name." He gave a little shake of his head, thinking of Kushina's stubbornness and how her daughter had inherited it. "Okay. I kinda of get it, but damn," she was coming to a dead end to her thoughts. She had a point to make. She took a deep breath. "So I might get why you couldn't tell me about my dad, but if you let me have her name, why didn't you tell me more about her?" Hiruzen did not turn and look at her, simply stared at the face of her father, so strong and wise, and dead before his time. Minato had nothing that he loved more than his family and his village. He would have been a Hokage unlike any before him, and he was, but he could have done so much more. He knew honor and duty and the meaning of sacrifice, and that gave him the wisdom needed to lead. Hiruzen thought of Kushina, a woman that was Mionto equal in strength and kindness. She had the perfect temperament for him, and her ideals matched his. A woman who had no war and loss as a girl. The same loss and pains as her daughter. Kushina devoted herself to a village that was not even her own and the family she had made within it. Her friends, her husband and her children. I knew that if I told you about her, of the possibility she was alive somewhere with your brother, then you would have gone to look for them. He sighed and looked over his shoulder at Naruto with sympathy. And what would have been wrong with that? Naruto asked seriously, unable to think of how that could have been a bad thing at all. It wasn't as if she had very many people who would have missed her. No one would have missed me. The worst was the bitter truth of those words. If Naruto had left back then, no one but him would have cared. Because if anyone had gotten their hands on you, they could have used you. He didn't have to explain further what he meant. Naruto understood. I'm not some weapon, something that people can use against each other. She screamed and slapped a hand to her chest. I'm a person. In this world there is no difference between a shinobi and the kunai they wield. Both are weapons used by a master. The old man shook his head sadly. He was surprised Kakashi hadn't taught them such yet. Not all saw it that way, but it was a harsh reality to being a ninja. They fought for under the orders of their kage, and died for their village. So our lives and feelings don't matter at all? She asked in a small voice, her shoulders slumping, her brows knitting together her over angry azure eyes. That's not quite right. But as a shinobi, what you feel, who you care about in your personal life, all of that is meant to come second to the orders you are given by your leader and the protection of the village by any means. He tried to explain better. Arg, this is making my head hurt. She wailed. Just because we're ninja we shouldn't be treated like we don't matter or that you or anyone else gets to act like we can just throw us away. She sneered in disgust. Is that how you have to see us when you're Hokage? Naruto asked, feeling disgusted and torn. She kept picturing Zabuza and Haku's face of their story. No, being Hokage means you have to see them as more, so that you may honor their lives if their end comes. He told her. He didn't want to disillusion her dream, but he felt he needed to explain this to her. I speak with my shinobi. I know the people they are. I am aware of their families and loved ones who worry about their lives and wait for them to come home after every mission. The shinobi of my village are not nothing to me, Naruto. He said in a grave voice, his eyes burning. You are not nothing to me. I had believed you thought better of me than that, he said, looking hurt. Naruto bit her lip and looked at the floor to avert her eyes. The point is, if I told you and you went looking for your mother, be it that you were able to sneak out or even if I sent you with someone and you were caught by another village, you could have been used against Konoha and the world. I had to make a hard choice. He had turned to look at her fully now. He knew he did not deserve to look away, though he felt no shame in his decision. I'm sorry you've had to grow up alone. I wouldn't have been lonely if you hadn't taken me to live in a tiny apartment by myself. She couldn't help the bitterness that she felt or the tight feeling behind her eyes. She was proud when she didn't cry. I wasn't allowed to keep you, Naruto. He admitted to her, but I wanted to. The council thought you might be a threat to my life after the pain you endure in that place. That you might just break one day. She looked at him with disbelief. You really wanted to keep me? She asked unsurely. I did very much. Maybe you wouldn't have had to hide if I could have kept you. I'm so sorry, he told her. Naruto wanted to believe him, she really did. He walked over to her and placed a hand on her shoulder softly. He had very large hands for an old man, Naruto sometimes thought. You still have so much growing to do, but you've come very far from where you started. I'm very proud of you, Naruto. With her standing in front of him, it was as if he could see the future, see the young woman she would become. She would be as beautiful and strong as her mother and as humble and kind as her father. It was a picture of hope. The idea that she could rise above the persecution that she has faced, that she could accomplish her dream and be a great leader like her father, made a fire roar in his chest. The will of fire that the first Hokage founded the village on, the words that his sensei always spoke to him of. The idea that she could rise above the persecution that she has faced, that she could accomplish her dream and be a great leader like her father, made a fire roar in his chest. The will of fire that the first Hokage founded the village on, the words that his sensei always spoke to him of. He let out a long breath. Your father did love you, Naruto, and it broke his heart when he had to do what he did. He had hoped the villagers would treat you as a hero after he died. He truly believed in the goodness of the people. He could have never imagined that they would come to treat you so cruelly. He sighed and turned back to his desk, his back to her as he stared out the windows and across the scenery of the village. Okay, she swallowed and wiped her eyes with a sniff. And, I'm not gonna take my henge pills anymore. She told him, trying to sound sure and confident. Okay, the Hokage agreed, turning around and smiling as he sat down in his chair. There was a moment of understanding silence between them before Aki cleared his throat. Lord Hokage, we were wondering if our house was sold after we left. Aki stepped forward, gently patting his sister's shoulder as he put himself at the center. Hiruzen lit his pipe again, taking an inhale before he answered the young man. No, we didn't sell it. I have the keys if you would like to move back in for your stay here. Yes, if you don't mind. Aki nodded. We missed our home. Aki looked back at his brothers. They were all very young when they left, but there were certain things, important things that stuck with them. The house in which they spent their toddler years was one. I understand. The house has been left exactly as is it was when you left. That saying, I do have someone come in to dust and clean once a month. Opening a drawer, he took out 2 matching keys in which he handed to Aki. I can have extras made for each of you if you would like. Just leave one of the keys with me. He offered the young man, pointing a finger to the keys he just handed over. We would appreciate that, Aki told him, pocketing his key and giving the other back. Thank you. If you have any further questions, please feel free to come back to speak with me. He told them, I also want you to have this, Aki-kun, but keep in mind the consequences of what you do with this information. The Hokage said and slid a sealed folder across his desk, which Aki took. Thank you, Lord Third. Aki bowed at the waist to him. I already know you will, but I still find the need to say it. Please take care of your sister. He said to the 4 with the utmost sincerity. She means a great deal to me. We will, Aki promised. Our gratitude towards you is immense. You went through great lengths to find us, we won't forget that. Aki smiled, his soulful eyes looking deep into Hiruzen's. The man only nodded, watching as Aki began to corral out his siblings from the office, the twins already distracting Naruto with talk of pranks. The 3rd Hokage gave a worried sigh. He hoped they wouldn't cause too much mischief. Should we go to the house now? Aki asked them, trying his hardest not to look down at his sister beside him who was crying. He had a feeling she didn't want anyone to see her this way. So much had just happened. She finally heard the truth from the 3rd himself. He didn't even argue when she told him she was going to stop taking her henge pills. It just felt like so much all at once, like a boulder had been lifted too fast off her chest that she couldn't catch her breath fast enough, left gasping as she tried to get it under control. Taka, behind her, seemed to sense what Aki did, and in an attempt to help his sister he brought his large hands around to place over her eyes and cheeks to hide her tears. It will be okay, he said softly in his deep timbre voice. Naruto took a deep breath, and that made her shoulder give one last tremble. She wrapped her arms around herself, rubbed her arms a bit, and then brought them back to her side. We got you, sis, the twins whispered their encouragement, not wanting to be too overwhelming. She nodded her head and swallowed thickly. Taka moved his hands just below Naruto's eyes and carefully wiped the tears that were still there from her face from where he stood behind her. Aki took a breath and put on a smile, hands clenched in his pants, upset at his own inability to comfort his sister without scaring her off. He couldn't help how overbearing and clingy he was. He was like that since he was a baby, oversensitive and sentimental, with a loud and charming personality that people either loved about him or found incredibly annoying. His sister found him as the latter. We should grab some futons before we go to the house. We didn't have many, and our beds are sure to be too small for us now. He suggested to them, trying to distract himself from lifting into his arms with a swoop to comfort and cradle her like the child she really did not want to be treated like. But she was only a kid, and kids should depend on their elders. That's what he wanted for her. Aki wanted Naruto to feel like she could open up and depend on her brothers, especially him, when she was upset about anything. It'll be like a sleepover, we'll all be in the same room and we can. Aki had begun to rant about what fun time they would have, but his siblings had stopped listening as the twins had grabbed Naruto and pulled her ahead of them. Taka was starting to follow them, leaving Aki behind. Hey! He gave an indignant shout, flushing red as he tried to catch up. The twins just laughed as they sped up, trying to keep just out of Aki's reach, just to upset him. The oldest of them pouted as he jogged after them. Naruto glanced around her as the twins dragged her along. They were pointing at shop displays, licking their lips at delicious food that was cooking, the smell wafting out of shop doors or wrapping around the carts they were prepared at. A small stand was selling jewelry, and some of the light had caught the silver and faux crystal. Naruto had never been very interested in accessorizing. She saw that some girls wore bracelets or necklaces. Ino had her ears pierced, and so did a few other girls in their academy class. Naruto had seen some older teens with their nose pierced. Naruto thought they looked cool, she wondered if it would hurt. It looked so small, she couldn't imagine that it would hurt that much. A pair of earrings caught Naruto's eye. She had never gotten her ears pierced. Shops wouldn't do it without a parent or guardian's consent until you were 13, so Naruto had another year to go. She touched her ears and thought about getting them just to have them, but changed her mind. They would just collect dust and she would probably lose them. Not thinking about the earrings anymore, she turned back to the twins and tried to keep up. Aki, having noticed Naruto's longing gaze at the jewelry and let himself fall behind to go to the small standing shop. He smiled at the merchant when he was greeted and began to run his eyes over the merchandise. He found something out of the ordinary but absolutely perfect for his little sister. He hoped they were what he caught her eye. Excited, he quickly paid the price for them and had the gift wrapped up before stowing it in his pocket. With the earrings tucked safely away, Aki ran to catch up with his siblings. The oldest of them watched the four with hard-to-hide glee. Everyone was smiling or laughing, having a good time together. That was how they should be. Together, and Aki was going to make sure that they stayed that way for a long time. He looked at the envelope in his hands, which contained detailed information on those that had been behind the conspiracy that took Naruto from their family and drove their mother out of the village with grief. Revenge was right in his hands now, and his family would finally see justice done by their own hands. He was brought out happily from his thoughts by Naruto's voice. "Ichiraku's ramen is the best," she was telling the twins. "Then let's go," Nikki shouted. "Point the way," joined Mickey in the excitement. They were all starting to get hungry again and were happily to follow Naruto to a recommended source of substances, especially if it was ramen. It was late morning, still a little while to noon, but an early lunch never hurt anyone. "Hi, Ayame." Naruto waved to the girl behind the food bar as they arrived. "Hello, Naruto-kun," the older girl returned the greeting, leaning forward behind the counter. She didn't even blink at Naruto's appearance. The brothers shared a questioning look. "Did she know? You look very cute today." Naruto got on her tiptoes to lean up to meet Ayame, whispering to her. "I'm really a girl," she told her. "I can see that." Ayame whispered back and giggled. Ichiraku glanced over his shoulder at her, his face scary. "Do you still love my ramen?" he asked her. "Of course," she shouted as if he could doubt her love. "Then that's all that matters, kid." He grinned. "Now, who did you bring today?" "These are my brothers," Naruto told him as she sat back. "Yeah, I have brothers now too. It's been a really messed up 24 hours. Ayame blinked and frowned. She looked at the brothers with suspicion. Naruto was an orphan, and not knowing the full story, this news unsettled her. She cared a lot about Naruto and didn't want her to get hurt. But Naruto seemed comfortable with them, and so she put on a smile. "That's great, I'm so happy for you, Naruto," the brunette told the younger girl. "So, what can I get you boys?" They all then continued to put in their order. When Tucci came back with their ramen, he slammed the bowls of the two oldest in front of them, his face twisted in a grievous glare. "You hurt her and I'll turn you into my new secret ingredient." He warned them before Ayame came to their rescue, pulling her father back and bringing the twins their bowls this time rather than Tucci. "Please forgive my dad, we've known Naruto since she was little." The boys nodded their understanding. "We're very protective of her." Aki respected that and swore they had no reason to apologize. Naruto and the twins dug right into their ramen, skillfully lifting some noodles from the bowl and slurping them down. Taka and Aki ate with a little more finesse, but with no less gusto. It was delicious. After they all had their fill of ramen, Aki paid the bill and the siblings said goodbye to Ayame and Tucci. They stopped only once on the way to the house in order to buy futons for that night. One for each of them. Aki chatted on again about making it a sleepover and how much fun they were going to have that night. Listing off the things they could do to make it fun. "We can braid your hair and tell stories. Oh, it's going to be great," he said in a cheer. The truth was Aki needed to distract himself. It was a strange experience for Aki, walking the same path to his house that his mother and father had taken when he was young, so many years ago. So much had changed and a number of things had stayed the same. The road felt just as long a walk as it had before, located in a corner of the village that rose into a soft, sloping hill. They weren't far from the Uchiha compound. His mother used to take him to visit her friend Makoto and her son Itachi often. Their mother had thought since they had been around the same age so they would make good playmates. He tried not to think of those memories of Itachi. Right now wasn't about him or even about the past, but his sister and showing her what they could offer her. To fill her with images of the happy family future they could have from here on out, in a warm and loving home filled with laughter. Eventually, they were close enough that Aki could see the house. The road went up a hill where houses sat on man-made steps of lawn. Their house was right before the house at the very top. Like some of the houses along that road, it was a two-story, elevated house with beige walls and a cherry-planked roof and a tower attached at the back right corner of the house. You had to take a set of stairs to a walkway along the tower side of the house to the front door. The second floor looked like it was shorter than the first, a balcony at the front coming right out on top of the forefront of the first floor. Aki had to take a deep breath as they stopped in front of the property. It had been so long, he hadn't thought he would ever see this house again. He expected his father to open the door and wave him in like he had done every day when he was little. His father always made sure to make the time to be home when Aki got back from school, that is if he wasn't away on a mission, and when he was he would wait out on the walkway, legs hanging through the spaces of the railing, watching and waiting to see his dad come up the hill until his mother made him come inside. "Welcome home, Naruto." Aki turned to his sister, his arms stretched out like wings on either side of him, a big smile on his face that seemed like it could light up the world. Naruto looked at the house in wonder. It was huge. This was her family's home. Well, now that she was thinking of it, they would need a big house when they were planning to have 5 children running around it. The Hokage might have had a caretaker come to clean the house, but the yard was terribly unkempt. They walked up the steps at the side of the road up onto the yard. There were dead patches of grass scattered around like the patches of a quilt, and the weeds had conquered almost every inch of the plot of land. "Well, let's go see if the caretaker already came this month, shall we?" Aki said excitedly, moving up the stairs. When he got to the door he waited for them to catch up before he slipped the key into the lock. He opened the door but hesitated. Aki turned and looked at Naruto. "Why don't you go in first?" he said and stepped aside for her, key in the lock, the door just waiting to be pushed open. "Are you sure?" she asked, taken by surprise. "You guys are the ones who haven't been back in forever?" "We're sure." The twins chimed in, coming up behind her and giving her a little push with the futons in their arms. "Okay." Naruto opened the door for them and stepped into the house. The door opened into a long and darkened hallway. There was a shoe rack to the left of the entrance and they all out of habit slipped off their sandals and put them into a dusty cubby. It was when she was putting her own in that Naruto noticed that the cubby had tags. Each of the boys had a labeled cube with their name. There were even 2 with "Mom" and "Dad" labels. She didn't have her own yet. Of course, she wouldn't, she hadn't even been born yet and would have been too small for shoes. "Guess the caretaker hasn't come by yet this month," Aki said as he wiped a hand over dust-misted photograph on the wall. There were a few on the walls of the entrance. Taka found the switch and turned on the light in the hall. At the end of the entrance on the right was a staircase leading up to the second floor. Across it to the right was a door. Aki opened it to reveal a large and spacious living room. Going into the living room there was an old television with some cushions in front of it on the right wall next to a large window. There were also 2 couches with a coffee table between them on the left. Across the room in a corner was a bookshelf with a recliner and end table next to it. Across from that was a household shrine for the deceased. Between the 2 was a door. "That goes to Dad's office and the guest bathroom," Aki told her. Naruto hummed and stepped further inside. On the wall between the shrine and the couches was a large archway leading into a dining room and connected to that was the kitchen. It had an island table in the middle, with marble counters and an old but still working refrigerator. All of it was very nice, but Naruto was looking for something else. "Where is?" "Go up the stairs and it's the second room on your left," Taka told her before Aki could. It wasn't hard for them to realize what she was looking for. Her room. She gave quick thanks and made a run back into the hall and across to the stairs, feet skidding as she rounded the corner of into the stairs and then practically crawled up the rest of the way when she lost her footing in the rush. When she got to the top she stopped, feeling out of breath and frozen. The second floor started out as a wide hall with 2 doors on either side, one at the end and then a narrow hall after the second on her left that had another door and one at the end of that hall that Naruto could see through the glass door leading to the balcony. She took a deep breath and went to the second door on the left, just like Taka had told her. Her hand shook as she reached for the handle. She closed her eyes, twisted the knob and pushed the door open. She gasped at the room before her when she opened her eyes. This was her room, her nursery. It was beautiful and everything in it had been carefully picked for her. The walls were a soft, coral color. On the wall with the door, just to her left was a white crib with pink bedding and a colorful mobile of real seashells. In front of the door was a white bamboo dresser with gold knobs and a gold-framed mirror hung above it. There was pink armchair with pillows and a handmade mermaid doll. In the center of the ceiling was a gold and white, little chandelier with little white starfish dangling in some places. Toys were carefully stored in a wicker basket in the corner. There were white-framed photos of her brother and family on the walls and tables, so she was always surrounded by their faces. She picked up the mermaid doll and sat armchair. She tucked her knees against her chest and plaid with yellow yarn hair of the felt something tight and painful in her chest. This was her room. Her mind screamed. The place she had been meant to grow up in, to change with her as she got older, where her earliest memories should have begun and not in some dungeon locked away from any sunlight. This was all supposed to be hers and now she was too old for it. Closing her eyes she could see her mother in the very chair she sat, holding her and singing a lullaby to get her to sleep, or her father sitting with her on his knee, telling her a story. When she was a little older she could picture the twins stealing one of her toys and Aki or Taka valiantly getting it back for her. She could imagine having played with her brothers on the soft throw rug, or her mom helping her look through her dresser for what to wear on her first day at the academy. That made her think what it would have been like to have one of her parents walk her to the school for her first day, hug her and kiss her before she went in. And when they did she would get flustered and tell them they were embarrassing her. But she would secretly be really happy. All of that was lost to her, she would never have it. Rocking she let the pain and loss hit her hard. She made this terrible, wheezing noise between sobs that she was sure her brothers could hear from downstairs. She hated thinking about it, but she couldn't stop it. She sat, curled in the chair until her eyes dried up and she couldn't produce any more tears and her throat was sore from sobbing so hard until she could barely breathe. When she was done, she wiped at her eyes, put the doll back down and left the room. She found the room just before hers was actually a bathroom. She stopped in real quick to wash her face in the sink, getting rid of the tear streaks down her cheeks. She found a cloth and soaked it with the water as cold as it would go and then held it to her eyes to help any redness or swelling. She was sure her brothers had heard her and was surprised none of them had come up. She had a feeling that maybe Taka had convinced them to leave her alone. She was happy that they had, but she was a bit embarrassed still. There was no way they hadn't heard her nasty sobbing. Once she felt she didn't look too terrible she went back downstairs. She called out their names as she took the stairs two at a time, nearly slipping at the bottom only to be caught by Taka. "Thanks, Taka." She gave him such a grin that he was momentarily surprised. She hadn't really smiled too much around them so far. "Are you okay?" he asked as he let go of her now that she was righted. She nodded, but she had a feeling he wasn't just asking about her fall. He just looked at her and then suddenly turned around and went into the living room. The twins were wiping down the floors and when she looked for him, Naruto found Aki scrubbing the kitchen counters. "Who's this for?" Naruto asked, walking to the altar. Hearing her question from the other side, Aki had left the kitchen and looked around the archway. "It's for our grandfather," he told her and then walked the rest of the way over. He pulled open the doors of the shrine. The inside was spotless, and he took a match from a painted jar and lit the incense. The photo in the middle was a smiling man, younger than the Sandame was now, maybe in the late 40s or early 50s. Not all that old at all. It somehow made it so much sadder. It wasn't a full picture, just from the chest up like most memorial photos, but Naruto could easily tell that the man was wearing a sokutai and wore a Konmuri hat over his inky black hair. He must have been someone extremely important. Naruto noticed that he had violet eyes like the boys and their mom. "We'll have to add father's photo and prepare a proper offering later," he said after a moment of silence as he paid his respects. He left the doors open for the incense to burn and lit the candles that were on either side of the photograph as well. "Is this mom's dad or dad's dad?" She asked him, wishing to know before she prayed. Our mother's, he said. His name was Uzumaki Toru. Aki was smiling softly as he watched her take his place on the zabuton in front of the butsudan, pressing her hands together and bowing her head in prayer. It's nice to meet you, grandfather, she said to the photo. Please look after me from now on. Once done, she looked up at Aki. What about our dad's family? He only had his parents. His father died when he was young, and his mother died just after I was born. They have headstones in the citizens' graveyard here in the village. He told her, happy that she was taking an interest. She looked back at the picture of their grandfather, studying his face. What was our dad like? Oh, Aki should have been ready to answer that question, but he wasn't. He was, it's okay if it's hard for you to talk about him, you can tell me another time. She looked over her shoulder at him and smiled, reaching out to take his hand and giving his fingers a compassionate squeeze before standing up. He didn't know what it was about seeing her room that had changed things for her. He had heard her crying, so he hadn't expected her to be so positive when she came back down. But he wasn't going to complain. He was just happy she was smiling at him at all. So we're cleaning, I guess? She asked him. Yeah, you can help with Dad's office. He winked at her. If she wanted to know more about him, then it was as good of a place to start. He opened the door for her and grabbed a rag from Nikki, who was brushing off the reading corner. The room was indeed an office. With a big oak desk and high chair against the left wall when you walked in, the door to the bathroom behind it. There was a window of the room, facing the front of the house. When Naruto pushed back the blinds, she could see out on the hill. Naruto took her time walking around the ring of the room, examining the titles of the books and scrolls her father had on the bookshelf and the people in the pictures that hung up all over the walls. Some of the people looked familiar, like she might have seen them when walking in the village. A few faces even reminded her of those she had gone to the academy with, and she was pretty sure one of the men in a photo with her father was Shikamaru's dad. Then as she came over to her father's desk, which was still stacked with papers never looked over, there were only 2 framed photons at the back corner. A family photo and one with her dad and 3 younger children, but older than the boys. Is that Kakashi-sensei? She squinted at the photo, picking it up and wiping the dust from the glass to see the image clearer. Yeah, our dad was his genin captain. The girl is Nohara Rin and the other boy is Uchiha Obito. He told her, and the tone of his voice had Naruto turning her head to glance at him. He looked sad. They were dead, she assumed. I can't believe Kakashi-sensei's never mentioned them. I mean, I'm his sensei's kid and Sasuke is an Uchiha, so why? That might be why he never said anything, Aki told her, his eyes honed in on Obito, remembering the blow it had been on their mother when he died. She had really liked that boy. Like another son. Then there was Rin, sweet Rin, who she had adored and dreamed of having a daughter just like her. Losing them both was horrible on his parents. It was like losing your own child. Minato had been more than just their sensei, and Kushina had invited them into her home with open arms, to be someone they could come to about anything at all. Thinking about it, Naruto was more like Obito than Rin. Aki thought their mom might like that just as much when they met and saw for herself. I think you would have gotten along really well with Obito. I don't know you very well yet, but I think the two of you are a lot alike personality-wise. He turned his frown around, petting her head sweetly. She looked up at him. Really? Really? He grinned. He was a stubborn, funny, good kid. They spent a lot of time just looking at the photographs. Naruto was curious about some of the people in them. She had been right, some actually were the parents of some of her classmates. Nara Shikaku. Aki tapped the glass, right under his face. He was a good friend of our family. He's older than Mom though, I think it's only a 2-year difference. But somehow he and Dad knew each other. I know Shikamaru from school, and geez is he super lazy. She told him and rolled her eyes. I don't even know why he took ninja classes. He might as well be a civilian because he never wants to do anything but watch the clouds. Aki glanced at the photograph from his father's coronation as Hokage. He took a deep breath, memories coming back. He was a great father. Even as Hokage, he always made us feel like we came first, and that's something very hard for those who are cages. He told her. He loved our mom and he loved us, he especially loved you. He told her, and she could tell it was hard for him. If he loved me, why did he do something so bad to me? Naruto wasn't angry, she was just sad. She couldn't understand it. You know about the 9 tails. That our dad sealed it inside of me, don't you? Her voice was so small, her eyes blown wide with vulnerability. "We do," he nodded. "And you still want me, even with a demon inside of me?" she asked, filled with doubt. "Of course we do," he nearly shouted, surprised that she would think they didn't. "And I'm going to tell you something really important, okay?" He put his hands on her shoulders. "Mom was the Jinchuriki for the 9 tails before you." He began to explain. "And yes, there were people who were scared of her, but there were also people who loved her. And they loved her knowing about the demon she held, just like we love you." He knew he might be pushing his luck, but he pulled her into a hug anyway, his arms wrapping around her shoulders with her face pressed to his chest while he rested his cheek against the top of her head. It wasn't a suffocating hug like the last time, it was gentle and comforting. He wanted to reassure her that they wouldn't turn her away, that they accepted her. "We won't ever reject you, Naruto, I promise." Aki knew the pain she had been through. He didn't want her to ever feel lonely again. "You don't have to go through this alone anymore. In fact, I was really hoping that you would move in with us while we're here. I don't want us to lose any more time with you," he told her, holding her a little tighter than before. Naruto tried to imagine it, coming home to a family, having meals together, laughing and being happy. "Could I really live here with you?" "Yes." He pulled back and beamed, showing no expression of hesitation. "I want nothing more than that. I guess it could be fun," she told him, lips twitching into a shy smile. "I'll have to tell my landlord. I don't have much, but I have to get my plants," she said, remembering the plants she had carefully and lovingly raised. Aki smiled so big it hurt his face. They would finally all be together under the same roof. Everything was falling into place. He hugged her tight and squeezed, swinging her around, making a happy high-pitched noise that made Naruto's ears ring. But she didn't struggle as much as she could have, letting him vent his joy for a little while. Seeing her brother so ridiculously happy, she just couldn't bring herself to bring him down this time. He genuinely wanted her around every day with them, to be a family with her, and she felt a little warm inside herself at the thought. After a minute, Aki calmed down, breathing heavy as he tried to compose himself, still grinning. "We should probably go and help the others with the cleaning," he told her as he stood back up, stretching his arms up and above his head. He felt the taut muscles in his back stretch before he pushed his shoulders back until he heard a pop in his spine. "Sounds good to me," she said with an easy smile that made Aki's heart soar to see. She went into the kitchen with Aki to get the cleaning supplies she needed to tidy up her dad's office and dust the pictures and clean the floors. Together the 5 of them made quick work in cleaning the house until it shone. They stumbled and tripped over one another as they cleaned downstairs, sometimes yelling in frustration, sometimes laughing. They aired out their bedrooms and vacuumed the upstairs. When they had finished, they all collapsed in the living room, Naruto laying across her sprawled-out brothers, too tired to care that the twins' knees were pressing into her spine. Her legs over Taka's stomach and her neck were bent over Aki's thigh, leaving her looking upside down. "Naruto, do you want to go into the village with me?" Aki asked her. His first reply was a groan. "I have to order new beds for all of us, and we can go to your apartment for your plants if you want." "Okay." She managed a word and nodded, a little breathless. Aki let her get up first, seeing as she was laying on top of all of them. Aki and Naruto looked at the other 3, still on the floor and looking worn out from the cleaning spree they had just been on. "Do you want me to pick up anything specific for you guys while I'm out?" Aki asked their brothers. "Pretz." The twins shouted at the same, not moving an inch from where they sat. Aki gave a chuckle and a shake of his head, knowing them so well. He promised he would get some for them. "What about you, Taka?" Aki looked at Taka. He looked much more composed than the rest of them, his arms behind him to prop him up while his legs stretched out in front of him, ankles crossed. "Picari, please." He gave a polite rumble from his spot. "All right, we'll be back soon," he told them with a smile. He looked back to Naruto and they made them out of the room and down the hall. She was quick to grab and wiggle into her sandals. He grinned when he saw that she was actually waiting for him. Aki was happy when Naruto started asking him more questions about their family on the way to the stores. Some small, insequential things. Like she asked why Taka was so tall. Neither of their parents was that tall. Aki told her that Taka got his height from their grandfather Toru, and his silent nature from their mother's mother. Their grandmother, Uzumaki Urara, was a fierce but silent woman, proud and traditional, who was as serene and beautiful as her name. On his own, he told her how they had a great relative that had been the wife of the first Hokage, that she passed the 9 tails to their mother when she came to the village as a girl. But there was something much more important he needed to tell her. Something she needed to hear. In our village, Jinchuriki are not scorned for the demons they hold but celebrated for their strength and sacrifice to keep such powerful entities at bay. He smiled down at her with understanding and support. Is that true? She asked in a small voice. So quick to not believe him. Probably because even she knew it was natural for people to be scared and dislike someone who had a monster in them that had killed their loved ones. Aki nodded. That sounds nice. I just really want people to acknowledge me, for me though. I want them to see me. She said, eyes ahead and determined. That's why I trained so hard, that's why I want to become the Hokage. Aki didn't know how to feel about his sister wanting to be Hokage. He didn't think they would stay here too long after their mom arrived. He had assumed that Naruto would go back with them. He treasured every second with his sister now and wanted to know her better, get an understanding of who she was and what she liked. He had lost 12 years of coddling and loving her like he had always dreamed of, so he couldn't help but lay it all on her a little thick. He was glad to know what her dream was, but he didn't agree with it. This place wasn't good for her and he didn't want her to tie herself to it with that type of dream. They arrived at the furniture store first and he asked that she pick out some things that she might like in her room. Naruto tried to argue that she could bring the furniture from her apartment. She didn't want him spending money on her. Aki reassured her that they had plenty to spare and would rather spend it on spoiling her if he could, but if she really felt bad about it he said she could bring her bed from her apartment over to the house. But he wanted her to choose some decorations to make her room personal and hers. Aki said as she wasn't sure he would help. He got her to agree on a navy and pink bedding with a set of matching pillows. She picked out a gray beanbag chair, new curtains for her window, and this peel and stick chalkboard. Aki wasn't sure what she was going to use it for, but he was just glad she was finally getting into the shopping. When they were done, he was happy to know her room would look like a proper one for someone her age. With the items Naruto had picked out, Aki also ordered the rest of everyone's beds for them. They were told their orders would be delivered by tomorrow night or at the latest the morning after that. With that errand finished they took their receipt. They made their way to Naruto's apartment. They would pick up her plants first and then go back for the mattress, being that they were only 2 people. Once that was done they would pick up what the others had asked them for on their way back home. She had only left that morning, yet coming back she felt she had been gone for weeks. It was strange to feel that way. She didn't want to let it go completely, couldn't. She needed somewhere she could go back to if things ever got bad or she would be out on the streets. She wasn't ready to assume that living with her brothers was a permanent thing. It's only been 1 day after all. She couldn't be an idiot this time. Can you wait here for a little bit? She asked Aki without looking at him. Her eyes were focused on her building. Are you sure? He frowned, taking a step towards her. Yeah, I just need a little time to myself. I'll call you up when I need your help. She told him, doing her best to give him a reassuring smile and hoping he would understand. All right then, he took a step back with a bow and left her to walk up the stairs alone. The stairs creaked under her feet, a familiar sound and feeling beneath her. This old, rickety apartment had been her home for 7 years. Brought here when she was 5 and now she was 12. Her childhood was here. She remembered the first time any kids her age came over. It was Shikamaru and Choji. They never came over much though. In fact, it might have only been that one time. But still, it had been fun, and they had hung out at the academy and afterward too on some days. Their parents were the only ones that didn't tell their kids to stay away from her. They never came over much though. In fact, it might have only been that one time. But still, it had been fun, and they had hung out at the academy and afterward too on some days. Their parents were the only ones that didn't tell their kids to stay away from her. She remembered that she had hoped they would have been put on a genin team with each other. She may tease Choji, but they seemed to like her more than others in their class. It would have been easier to work with them as a team. Getting to the door of her apartment, she thought of the difference between the painted plaque with her name on it and the rusted numbers over her apartment door. When she came back here, there was no one waiting for her, no one to spend the rest of the night with or eat dinner with. But at the house, her brothers were there, waiting to tell her, welcome home, and cook dinner together. To talk with or play games. She had what she always wanted. All she had to do was let go and say goodbye to this place. She put her key into the lock and opened the door. It was all just as they had left it, spotless and clean with a fridge full of food. She stepped further inside, looking at all the familiar things, the comfort that the small apartment had given her, its shelter and slight warmth. Naruto went to the bed and got on her knees to pull something out from underneath it. It was a wooden puzzle box 6 inches long, 4.5 inches wide and nearly 3 inches deep. It took 10 moves to open. Anything of true value to her she kept in the box. She took it out and just held it, thinking of the small but very important things that it held. "You're leaving." A voice spoke from the open door and it startled Naruto so badly she jumped to her feet, box in hand. In her door stood an elderly man, possibly as old as the Sandame. He had a bamboo cane and wore a pair of tan-colored slacks and a knit sweater. He had a long, gray beard and thinning hair. His eyes were half-lidded with bags under them and a number of age lines mapped across his face. He did not smile at her. "Atae-san," she greeted and bowed her head in respect. "You made quite a commotion last night," he complained, voice grumpy. "I am sorry." She quickly apologized for the fear of being kicked out instinctively motivating her actions. For so long this was the only place she had, the only place where a bed and shelter was waiting for her. The fear of that being taken away from her was still a natural reaction after so long. She couldn't lose it, she thought, forgetting there was another place waiting for her. "It won't happen again," she blurted the promise out. Atae was not cruel or mean, but he was a very stern and strict landlord. Naruto didn't doubt that he might evict her if he felt that she was a trouble to the other tenants. "You look different." He pointed a bony finger at her. She looked down at her clothes and touched her hair anxiously. How would she explain this? "Yeah, don't bother explaining, I knew all about it when I took you in." He waved a hand dismissively and then pointed to the box in her hands. "I believe my daughter gave you that box." She nodded. "Yes, Asami did. She thought it would be good to have a place to hide my valuables. She's always been a kind child." He gave a little hum, though he didn't exactly look disapproving. Naruto gave a deep bow to her landlord. "Thank you for taking care of me for all these years. I didn't do much for you but rent a room to you, I'm afraid," he told her, not looking all that bothered by it. She stood straight again. "Letting me live here is still more than some have done for me," she said, and a silence followed. "Well, despite your situations you always paid rent on time." He shrugged. "And you might have been a little loud sometimes, but I've had worse tenants." "But I have the feeling you're moving out," he said, though it wasn't a question. Somehow, Naruto didn't know how Atae knew that she was leaving. Naruto nodded. "I have a family, they want me to live with them." "Isn't that good?" he asked her. "Because you don't look too happy. Or maybe you've gotten used to being alone." "Maybe." She shrugged, looking at the box in her hands. "Don't be scared," he told her, his hardened, elderly exterior softening at the girl's uncertainty. "You should go with them." "But what if it doesn't work out?" she asked, fighting an internal war even though she had already said yes to Aki. "I won't have anywhere to go if I give up this place. I'll be on the streets." She thought about the possibilities, surprising herself with her pessimism. "Then don't give it up," he said, and Naruto blinked, confused at him. "If you pay at least half the rent every month on this apartment, you can come back whenever you want. I won't rent it out to anyone else," he promised. "Do we have a deal?" "You would really do that?" She wasn't sure how to take this offer. "For just half of the rent?" Atae nodded. "Better than no rent and getting a new good-for-nothing tenant that'll just miss their payments. You can find boxes in the shed to put your things in. I'm afraid I'm not in the best of shape to help you carry anything," he said, and tapped his cane against the ground. "That's all right," she told him. Aki was waiting for her and she knew he would help if she asked. "Thank you, Atae-san." Naruto gave a big smile, happy to be shown this kindness. The elderly landlord grunted and gave a nod before turning and leaving. When he was gone, Naruto went and got Aki. She decided not to tell him that she would still be keeping her apartment. She had a feeling it might hurt his feelings. So she kept quiet about it and summoned up a few clones to help them out. With her doppelgangers, they packed up all her things. They packed the food up first and had her clones rush to bring it all back to the house. Then they grabbed the things in the bathroom, her clothes, her training stuff and scrolls, and by the time they were done, all that was left was the bed, leaving behind the bed. She had a total of 4 boxes with her smaller plants. But her 2 bigger ones would need 2 arms to carry. She had her shadow clones take those and bring everything else back to the house for them. Aki wanted to go to the marketplace for more groceries, which Naruto didn't understand since they had sent her clones back with the food he had bought already, and that was a lot of food. They had barely made a dent in the quantity when they had cooked breakfast. Aki explained what they bought already might be enough for her, but he and the others were big eaters and he didn't want to run short on food. He also told her they might be having guests over. He didn't elaborate when she asked what he meant, he just grinned. It made Naruto suspicious. With arms full of groceries, Naruto thought about her mom and what her cooking would taste like. She always wanted a bento made by a mom. She used to look over the other kids' shoulders, hungry and envious of their carefully crafted lunches made by a loving mother. She didn't think anything was better than ramen, but maybe a homemade lunch was. While Naruto was thinking of her mother, in that moment in Uzushio, Kushina was preparing her things so that she could leave her village as soon as possible. Kushina was in her room, tossing it apart trying to find something. A woman with red hair the same as Kushina's stood in the doorway wearing a formal kimono and had her red hair elegantly up with a kanzashi hairpin for decoration. The woman was Kushina's younger sister. "Moriko, do you know where I put my kunai and shuriken?" Kushina asked, bent over an open drawer. She tossed the long hair of her ponytail over her shoulder. She was wearing a pale yellow dress with cut-out shoulders and blue rolling waves along the hems of her sleeves and across the slanted bottom of the dress. With the dress, she wore teal-green leggings and easy-to-slip-on sandals. She looked beautiful and regal, though she acted most of the time anything but regal. She was the oldest and the wild child. She didn't want to take up her mother's mantle, be the head of their extensive family business. She had wanted to be Hokage once. She had wanted to make her own name for herself and not just step in her mother's. And she was the red-hot habanero, for both her hair and her rage and power in a fight. "You gave them to the smith to sharpen, remember?" Moriko said, gave a tired little sigh. "I wish you would slow down." Kushina turned around, a joyous smile on her face. "The boys sent a summon to me last night. It's her, Moriko, it's Naruto." Hiruzen wasn't lying, she's in Konoha. Why didn't you say anything? Moriko's felt a gust of happiness for her sister blow through her. But she also felt confused and hurt that Kushina hadn't come to her right away with this news. They might not have been very close when they were young, but over the years, taking care of the boys, helping their mother, that had changed. She had thought that Kushina would have told her. "Because you were always a tattle and mother would try and stop me," Kushina explained with a roll of her eyes, but she wasn't trying to be mean to her little sister. Just teasing her a little. "That's not true," Moriko denied with a very childish pout. "Yes, it is," Kushina said and smiled softly. "You're just too honest." She turned back around to stuff something else into her pack. She grabbed a photo of her and the boys and she ran a hand over the spot she would imagine Naruto standing. "My baby girl is alive, Moriko." Her voice was a soft, longing whisper. "All these years she's been alone, without me to protect her. I can't imagine what she's been through." Kushina's heart hurt so awfully, like any moment it would just stop in her chest. Her shoulders were shaking, her chin tucked down so her hair fell and covered her face. Moriko couldn't imagine what expression she might possibly be wearing. "Yes, you can." Moriko stepped close and put a hand on her sister's shoulder. "Because you have gone through the same thing. That's why it hurts so much more. So you know why I'm rushing them." She looked at Moriko with restless, urgent fever in her eyes. "Mother just wants you to be safe, Onesan," Moriko finally said after a long silence. "She doesn't want to lose you or the boys. She's thinking of all the ways this can go wrong if we're not properly prepared or we're too hasty." Kushina gently pulled away from her sister. "I know. But you know how our mother is. She's going to send a small army with me and I can't waste my time watching them over my shoulder. I think the point is that they watch you." Moriko dared to give a teasing smirk. Kushina glared dangerously at her. "I have been grieving for 12 years for my husband and the daughter I thought I lost. I will not waste any time being held back by some half-wit bodyguards while I'm crossing half the world to get to my children," she said irritably with passion, her eyes burning bright like sparkling amethyst. "But, mother," Moriko attempted to protest before Kushina interrupted her softly. "I'll worry about her when the time comes. Right now I have a lot to do in as short of a time I can get it done," she told Moriko, putting her hands on both of her shoulders. Moriko meant well, and Kushina appreciated that, but she just didn't have the time for it. "It's a near 9-day journey to Konoha. I can't cut that in half if I have others with me." Kushina explained a little more calmly to her sister. I think you're underestimating the speed of the ninja in our village. Moriko stepped back, giving her a look. It wasn't like Kushina to doubt the capability of their ninja. No one is as fast as Minato, Kushina mumbled bitterly. Kushina. Moriko tried, but her sister shook her head at her. I'm sorry, You miss him. Moriko finished sympathetically. Every damn day, Kushina admitted. He was the love of my life. He wanted a little girl so badly, he loved the boys, but he dreamed of a little girl to spoil and coddle. She could feel the wet behind her eyes and she kept it back. I had to get to her. It not just for me, but for Minato too. She held tight to her bag, knuckles white in their grip on the tough fabric of it. He would want all of together. We're still hunted, Kushina. Moriko felt the need to remind her sister. The world is still scared of what we can do, even more so now that we've risen from the ashes. Kushina knew her sister was right, that her mother was right. The Uzumaki's history was long, their abilities still being explored and limitations tested. Some believed their village and people had descended from a celestial woman herself, blessing all that carried her blood with good health and long lives. Those who did not believe in such fairy tales blamed some form of sealing that they used on their bodies to help keep them strong and looking young. That wasn't the truth. Very rarely did they use their own techniques for selfish gain, but there were always those trying to start a war from nothing, just looking for any little excuse to tear a rift between people. That wasn't saying their people didn't have their bad seeds, their rogues. There was that risk in all villages. Kushina thought about how long her mother and sister had struggled to revive their heritage, how her mother rebuilt a new home for her people from the ground up. Sometimes Kushina wondered if she managed it all from just sheer love for her clan or pure pride alone. Urara was a stubborn, overachieving woman, and Kushina wouldn't put it past her to have pride alone as motivation. The destruction of their village was one of the greatest tragedies the world had ever known. The body count was horrible in the sheer number of lives lost, the survivors a small few scattered to the winds. Kushina and her family had lost a lot of their family and friends when their village was destroyed. All because of scarred old fools who let their weak minds fear what they couldn't understand. So like most people in history did, they attempted to destroy that very thing. In this case, it was people, ninja and civilians alike and their children. Burned and tortured for information before finally being allowed to die. And no one helped them. After decades of loyalty and shared knowledge towards their allies, they had been left to fend for themselves against an army of joined nations that put aside their difference for one coordinated massacre. It would never be forgotten. Just please be careful out there. Moriko begged her sister. Kushina pulled her into a tight hug. I will. When Naruto and Aki got home, the twins and Taka were outside in the front of the house, weeding and mowing the lawn. It was still light out and there were plenty of hours still left in the day. When their brothers saw Aki and Naruto come up the hill, they ran to meet them. They immediately went about relieving their sister of the groceries in her arms and left Aki to carry his. This caused their older brother to let out an indigent "Hey." No one paid him any mind though. Naruto followed her brothers into the house and continued to follow them to the kitchen, taking instruction from them as to where they wanted what things. After they were done putting the groceries away, they all went back outside to work on the yard. Naruto was not very good at weeding. She couldn't tell the difference between herbal plants and crabgrass. Luckily for them, any herbal garden that the family might have had once had either died or been grown over. Naruto liked plants, she adored her potted plants. It was something to take care of and come back home to. Her plants needed her, and she needed that. She didn't really know much about flowers though. Her plants were mostly Araceae and succulents. They worked long and hard until late into the afternoon and their stomachs began to growl. With the new state of the yard, Aki thought they might as well enjoy their hard work with a picnic outside. The twins used an old sheet from one of their kiddie beds and laid it out on the grass in the back of the house. Aki went back inside to make the lunch and Naruto made herself useful getting them cups and a fresh jug of cold water. Aki made them nikumen and some bunny molded onigiri. He even made little rabbit faces on them. Naruto started from one ear down when she ate them. They were just as delicious as the nikumen. You're a really good cook. Naruto complimented Aki, switching from taking a bite of her onigiri to the nikumen in her other hand. Thank you, he beamed ridiculously. I learned to cook in our grandmother's ryokan. Ryokan? A ryokan was a traditional inn that typically features tatami-matted rooms, communal hot spring in public areas to relax in a warm and laundered yukata. Some ryokan was incredibly exclusive to high-class clientele. Most though served travelers and even vacationers. Naruto had never been to a ryokan. For the most part, they camped outside when on missions. Aki hummed, having caught him after she took a bite of his own food. The twins decided to help explain. Our grandmother's parents owned one when she was a young girl. She invested in a rundown one after the war eventually took it over and created a chain of high-class ryokan. It was how she funded to the creation of the new Edi village. Said Mickey to her and took a drink of his water. Nikki took over. Aki grew up in the kitchens of a ryokan. Grandma thought working with her would teach us valuable life lessons and leadership. Nikki did not sound so fond of those memories. She can be strict, Taka said in that low voice of his. He barely talked at all, Naruto noticed early on. Naruto nodded in understanding. She was becoming more and more interested in this grandmother of hers and a little bit scared as well. She had never done well with strict people. After lunch, they finished the yard cleanup, and when that was done they hosed off the sides of the house and plucked off any crawling vines that had latched onto the siding before wiping the outside of all the windows. Naruto had used her ninja training for chores before on lower missions, so it wasn't anything too new for her. Using the technique she had learned to climb trees, she concentrated her chakra into her feet to stick to the walls. Naruto was on the side of the tower when she hears a voice that wasn't any of her brothers. Miki-kun, a sweet, Melody's voice suddenly called out. Looking down at the front of the house, Naruto saw a girl coming up the hill with an older, dirty blonde-haired woman behind her. The girl was beautiful, no older than the twins, with olive skin and shoulder-length, wavy auburn hair. She wore her forehead protector as a bandana around her neck and was in a toffee-colored short and sleeveless yukata. Instead of an obi, it had a string laced through the waist, sinking the yukata. The girl was so beautiful, with her perfect hair, long lashes, perfect nose and mouth, and her smile as she waved to them was dazzling. Naruto was so taken back by the girl that she stumbled down the wall, just barely catching herself. If she hadn't, she would have fallen on her head. "Are you okay?" Aki ran over, standing beneath her with a concerned look and arms out as if ready to catch her. "I'm fine," she called down, her face bright pink. "Oh no," the girl said and came running up to the house from the road. "I didn't mean to startle you." Mickey left what he was doing to go to the girl, but he looked at Naruto with the silent question of, "You alright?" in his eyes as he stood next to the girl now. She gave him a nod and he let out a barely noticeable sigh of relief. "This is Tatsuki, Naruto. She is my girlfriend and mine and Nikki's teammate." Mickey introduced her, sounding very proud of those two facts. Tatsuki smiled at her and Naruto felt captivated. How could someone be so pretty? "I'm so happy to meet Mickey and Nikki's sister. And this is Asa-sensei, she's our team leader." Nikki looked over at the older woman. Asa smiled kindly at Naruto. She had dark blue eyes and her hair, which was cut perfectly straight at the ends, was worn flipped up and clipped at the back. She also had freckles all over and small little age lines at her inner eye by her nose. She was a plain-faced woman, but there was a hardness behind her eyes that warned not to judge her by her appearance. She wore a light blue, thin blouse with slightly big sleeves that sinked at her elbows and gray pants rolled up to mid-calf. Naruto guessed the pants were uniform to their village, like the blue pants and vest that Kakashi-sensei and Iruka-sensei wore. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Naruto-sama." Asa bowed her head in a respectful greeting, her eyes bright and smile kind just like Tatsuki's. Naruto wasn't used to such formal introductions and scratched the back of her neck sheepishly as she grinned and returned the courtesy. "You are just the cutest," Tatsuki said softly and sweetly to Naruto, leaning over and bringing her face close to the younger girl's, putting her hands on her shoulders as she really got a look at her boyfriend's sister. Naruto was dazzled by Tatsuki's gray eyes, bits of silver glittering in the iris. Her lips were full and rosy with skin absolutely flawless. She was perfect. She was even prettier than Sakura, and Naruto thought Sakura was very pretty. But Tatsuki took the whole freaking cake. "It's nice to meet you, Naruto-chan," Tatsuki leaned back. "I hope the two of us can become good friends?" Naruto nodded dumbly and mumbled a, "Sure. I think you're overwhelming her a bit, Tatsuki." Asa-sensei advised her student. Naruto quickly shook her head. She's not, Naruto said loudly. I want to be friends. Tatsuki gave a very happy smile. I'm so glad. And if either of the twins gives you trouble, come to me. I know how to handle those boys. She said that and then smiled wickedly over her shoulders at the twins, who gave innocent looks and held their hands up, already ready to defend their case. We're not the ones you have to worry about, Nikki told her and subtly pointed to Aki. She glanced quickly at the eldest of the brothers and back to the twins. She nodded knowingly. Still smiling, this one more sympathetic and understanding, she looked back at Naruto. There was something in her eyes that reminded Naruto of Haku a little, a kindness and understanding. Her heart hurt a little whenever she thought of the boy that died on the bridge. I know they can be a little much, but they're good, sweet guys. I promise. Tatsuki tried to reassure the younger girl. After all, this was her boyfriend's sister, not to mention much more than just that. Tatsuki had been around the Uzumaki family for a while now. She knew how each of the brothers could be, especially Aki. This must be quite an adjustment for you, Tatsuki said empathetically. Having 4 boys appear one day and telling you they're your brothers after years of being without any family might be a lot for someone to handle. Kids were good at adapting to their surroundings and situations sometimes, but it could still be stressful, even the good changes in a person's life. I know we only just met, but if you ever want to talk about it you can come to me. She offered sweetly, moving back to press against Mickey's side affectionately. Her brother smiled and put his arm around Tatsuki's shoulders. Naruto scratched her neck again and grinned sheepishly. Thanks. Tatsuki gave one more smile her way before she turned her attention on Mickey. Nikki at one point joining the conversation as they caught up on the time they had been parted since the brothers had gone to Naruto's apartment yesterday. Asa-sensei had been worried when they didn't come back to the inn last night. As the eldest of them all, she technically was supposed to be overseeing and watching out for the brothers and the rest of their party. It was Tatsuki who had calmed her worries and let her know that they were all right. Tatsuki was practically a master tracker, very in tune with her teammates' chakra, allowing her to sense if they were in a sticky situation. Naruto didn't mean to just stand there and listen in on their conversation, but she just couldn't seem to move. Would you like our assistance, Prince Aki? Asa-sensei offered the young man. Naruto perked up at the honorific. Was their clan so important that her brother would be referred to as a prince? She raised her blonde brows in Aki's direction and he gave her a nervous look before giving his attention to Asa, who seemed to realize she has said something wrong, her eyes going wide before she let them drop apologetically. Naruto tilted her head in confusion. What had just happened? Aki gave a sigh before he shook his head. They had more than enough hands already and he prided himself in being a gentleman. You don't have to do that. I really do insist that we help in some way. Asa pressed the issue and gave a very tight smile, her eyes thin and stern. Aki gave in. Asa reminded him too much of his grandmother when she got like that. I guess we could use some help with the roof. We were working from the bottom up and I wanted to check for any loose shingles, he told her and pointed to the top of the house. Asa gave a much more relaxed and brighter smile. Genuinely happy to be put to some use. Then that's where we'll start. Come, Tatsuki, she called for her student. Tatsuki gave Mickey a quick kiss on the cheek before going with up the wall to the catwalk and jumping from the railing to the roof, landly soft and silently atop the shingles. Aki was relieved to find that none had come loose and fallen upon their landing. She's something, huh? Mickey nudged his sister with his elbow, looking for some type of approval. Naruto gave a small, quick dip of her chin in a nod. Yeah, she's super pretty and she seems really nice. I'm glad you like her. I really care about her, so it would mean a lot to me if you two got along, he explained to her. Naruto could see he meant it in his violet eyes. I don't think that'll be a problem. She gave him a grin and patted him roughly on the back. It was meant to be a reassuring gesture and show of support. That's good. Mickey sighed and smiled big and dopey. Mickey hadn't really been worried about Naruto and Tatsuki getting along. His girlfriend was pretty popular with people, sweet, kind and was a genuinely good person. When he, his brothers and mother had joined their grandmother at the new Edi village, Tatsuki had been amongst its new villagers. His mother had still been very depressed at the time and it was taking a toll on her youngest sons who desperately craved and needed her affection and attention. Tatsuki had approached the twins, having watched the way they lashed out and isolated themselves to only each other amongst the other children their age, wanting to reach out to them. With great patience, she eventually managed to get the twins to open up to her. Only after she had won a little game they had where she had to tell them which twin she thought they were. It hadn't been very difficult for her. To Tatsuki it was very clear to tell which one was which. She had no real explanation for how she knew if there was some telltale difference in how they stood or a tone difference in their voices, or maybe it was their chakra told her which was who. She only explained it as, Mickey is Mickey and Nikki is Nikki. Neither can be the other, you can only be you. The riddle confused and made the twins' heads spin, but they gave in and accepted her. Tatsuki was a great source of support and someone who was very easy for them to confide in. They ended up being great friends. Being that they were in the same academy class and because they already had a good relationship, the academy sensei thought it best to put them in a genin team together. Mickey only had the courage last year to ask her out. He was surprised when she said yes without hesitation. When they got back to work, Mickey had a huge grin plastered on and kept glancing up at the roof in hopes of getting a peek at his very pretty and wonderful girlfriend. They all took turns refilling the water jug and bringing out small snacks to keep their energy up. Together they managed to finish before dinner time. The group squeezed into the hall and went together into the living room, sweaty and starving. "Why don't you take a bath first?" Aki offered, looking to the others to see if that was okay. He had an overly warm smile. Naruto took a sniff of her collar and cringed. Yeah, that was probably a good idea, she thought. Sure, if no one else minds. They all gave their approval. Going upstairs, she found the bathroom. It was slightly more spacious than her apartment's bathroom, with a shower head and stool beside a deep tub with enough room to be comfortable and not squished between the sink and tub. It was obviously bigger than what she was used to. Her apartment's bathtub wasn't as big as this one, so she didn't have many opportunities to have a bath except her trips to the hot springs. Naruto liked going there to bathe rather than doing so at home. It was more relaxing and roomy. There were a few bottles around the tub, and after looking them over she found very old shampoo, conditioner, a bar of soap that should be thrown out, and bubble bath gel. With a dreamy look on her face and glittering stars in her eyes, she started to take off her clothes. She would rinse off her body and then enjoy a nice bubble bath after. She knew she couldn't stay in long because the others were waiting, but it was just too tempting to pass up. She put her stinky, sweat-soaked clothes in the dirty laundry basket. Her room was right next to the bathroom, so she could just quickly run in for clean clothes. Since her hair was already up and she had washed it just the night before, she avoided getting it wet and left it up. When she was done, she used a fluffy bath hairband to keep the stray hair back. Stopping the shower, she started to fill the tub while slowly adding the gel. She poured it along the stream of running water from the spout to help stir it up until the top of the water began to foam with hundreds of translucent bubbles. Naruto felt absolutely giddy. She had never actually had a bubble bath before, so when she saw the bottle sitting there she just couldn't resist using it. Sliding into the warmth of the sudsy tub was the best feeling in the world. Wow! She let out a loud, deep sigh as she leaned back in the tub. She hovered her hands just at the surface of the water, cutting through the layer of bubbles and watching as they engulfed her hands. Scooping up some of the bubbles, she blew them into the air, giggling as she watched them float up and around, a few landing on her face. She felt like a little kid. She sat in the bath probably longer than she should have when others were waiting for their turn. When she did get out, her skin was silky from the bath gel, something her rough and calloused hands and scabbed and dried joints hadn't been in a long time. Side effects of training for so hard and for so long. After wrapping herself in a fluffy towel, she opened the door and nearly tripped on the clothes left on the floor in front of the bathroom door. Lifting it from its place, she found the clothes consisted of a cute dress with short-capped sleeves and little flowers all over it. It was hideous. What is this? She didn't even finish what she was saying, just shook her head with a sigh before pulling on the dress. She could easily just go to her room and find something else to wear from her limited wardrobe, but she was sure Aki would just cry and pout if she didn't wear the dress he had laid out for her to dinner. Her stomach grumbled, and she was quick in running back downstairs. Sorry I took so long. She apologized sincerely, feeling guilty for taking up the bath for so long. Her brothers, the ones who obviously had nothing to do with her new dress, stared her up and down with eyebrows raised. Aki? She asked them. Aki, they confirmed, the twins rolling their eyes. They sat on the sofas with Tatsuki, and angled themselves towards the television. Asa looked at her only female student, her voice a soft demand rather than a generous offer. "Why don't you go next, Tatsuki?" Tatsuki did not argue and left her place sitting between the twins and went upstairs to wash up next. "I'm hungry." Naruto gave a little grumble. She started to make her way to the kitchen, the newly cleaned floor of the house cool under her toes. Before she got halfway to the kitchen, the smell hit her and she felt like she was floating as her eyes closed and she took in the heavenly scent. Her stomach growled loudly and her mouth watered. "Wonder what he's cooking this time?" she heard one of the twins ask each other from the other room. "I hope it's curry," the other commented. "Oh yeah, his spicy chicken curry is the best." Nikki agreed, at least Naruto thought it was Nikki's voice. There wasn't too big of a difference between their voices. Nikki's was just a slight bit deeper than Mickey's. But not as good as Mom's Dongpo pork curry. Mickey argued. "Yeah, but she doesn't make it that often." Their conversation continued on the subject of past meals. "That makes it even better," Mickey pointed out. His twin agreed. Coming down from the high of the mouth-watering smell, Naruto continued into the kitchen to see her oldest brother cooking. He was standing at the counter, his sleeves pushed up past his elbows, hands having been cleaned and scrubbed in the sink. "It smells really good," she chimed. She ran over and tried to see around him to what exactly it was he was cooking. Hearing the twins, she was curious as to exactly what it was. "I thought I would make something special for our first dinner as a family." He smiled gently down at her, patting her head, and as she looked up at him his face overlapped with someone else's and she swore. Naruto swore he looked just like their dad from the pictures she had seen. She had to shake her head to clear her mind of the thought, of the vision she had of her father standing right in front of her instead of her brother. "What is it?" she asked to distract herself. "Jalapeno steak don, you're going to love it," he said, his grin confident as he pushed his shoulders back a little, puffing his chest. The display made her laugh as she thought of a bird puffing its feathers up. Her brother was a peacock. A kujaku. Both were brightly colored and surprisingly simple-minded. "It sounds like something that Choji would eat. He loves barbecue food," she said, not really thinking about how he didn't know who Choji was, so it was no surprise to her when he asked who that was. "He was a classmate of mine in the academy. He eats a lot, he always had chips on him. Sometimes he would share with me." She tried to remember what happened to him after graduation. "I think he was put in a team with Ino and Shikamaru. Shikaku's son, the boy you were talking about earlier. The lazy one?" he asked her as he seasoned the beef, growing, remembering how she was blushing over talking about him. "Yeah," she answered, wondering how he knew their surnames. "Then this Choji is probably an Akamichi. The Nara, Yamanaka and Akamichi families have always been paired up with each other for generations," he explained, his focus on the meat. Naruto leaned against the counter, crossing her ankles, finally reminded that she was wearing a dress. "How do you know that?" He smirked, but his eyes were a little sad. "I was born here, and Dad and Mom were friends with them." Naruto wasn't sure what to do. She had come in to get food, but Aki was making dinner, so she didn't want to spoil her appetite. Maybe she could go back and talk with the twins. But then she thought about Taka and how she hadn't seen him when she came back down. "Where's Taka?" she asked, looking around the kitchen as if he would suddenly appear. Aki was slightly distracted and did not answer her right away. "Oh, downstairs cleaning up the training room. He said he would shower last." She hadn't been down to the training room yet, and the mere mention of training made her curious to see what it was like. Especially if it was a place that her mother and father had practiced their jutsu and taijutsu. Aki glanced from his preparation and saw the curiosity and wheels turning in her head. "It's the door beneath the walkway," he told her, and as she ran out, he yelled at her as she reached the entryway of the kitchen. "Just try not to get dirty or sweaty again before dinner, please." The twins chuckled from the other room. "You two shower after Tatsuki, you reek the most." She left as Aki shouted at the twins for laughing at him. Then there was a yelp. "Ow, Asa-sensei." She heard the twins whine as she got out the door. The training room was an oval-shaped space with slanted, angled walls and two sturdy-looking support beams spaced along the length of the room. Though it was called a training room, Naruto could see it was actually the foundation of the house and what held up the floor above it and the rest. It could have probably been used for storage like any other basement, but it seemed their parents had improvised some small amount of training to be possible in its limited space. Naruto expected the floor to be concrete, but it looked like wood had been laid down over it. The floor had a smooth cherry surface that allowed a bit more of a buffer than what solid concrete would supply during a fall. Taka was running a cloth from one end of the room to the other, polishing the floor in sprints. His bare feet pushed and pounded as he ran the drill. The chore itself could be considered a type of training if you wanted. Naruto didn't interrupt him. She made sure she was out of his way and just looked around the room from her spot by the door. A line of caged lamps was installed in the ceiling from one end of the room to the other, so the room was bathed in light. Between one beam and the wall, a wooden pole was installed for chin-ups and other such exercises. A Wing Chun and a punching bag were pushed into a corner out of the way, both looking like they had just been cleaned off. A number of weights varying in size were organized beside them. It looked like that was the majority of the equipment. The room wasn't overstuffed with things. If there wouldn't be all that much room to move around freely without worry. The beams already interrupted enough movement, so if things were all over the place you really wouldn't be able to train in any capacity. She tried to picture her dad standing in the room, what routine he might go through, what type of warm-ups did he use, what styled taijutsu did he prefer to practice, did he create new jutsu in this room or somewhere else. She noticed a few scorch marks on the walls and a smile pulled the corners of her lips up. She went over and touched one. Did her dad do this or her mom? Did they train together or separate? Inconsequential questions ran through her mind about her parents, seemingly more interested in that part of them than any other so far. She frowned. Both her mom and dad were such strong shinobi, so how was it that she was such a dead last? She tried and worked so hard, harder than anyone else, yet she still felt like she couldn't catch up. It was so frustrating. That's why she needed the Chunin exams. She had to show that she had gotten stronger. That they couldn't sneer at her anymore. That Sasuke and Sakura needed to finally respect her and Kakashi realize he was losing out by not training her. She just wanted to be looked at and seen. They trained hard every day in this room, their sweat and even their blood staining the floors. Their skills did not come easily to them. Taka said, as if having sensed her inner struggle. It felt like that was the most he spoke since the first night he and the others popped out of her closet. Naruto stared at him, her eyes big and surprised and waiting to see if he would say more and elaborate. He did. We're not a family of genius. We don't catch on to everything the first time. It takes a few tries until we get it right. Don't feel bad, you're not the only one that struggles. He gave her a barely there smile, trying to cheer her up. Really? She asked. After all, their dad was the Hokage and everyone said how strong he was even as a kid. Yes, Taka said, some sweat dripping down the side of his face. Even you? She asked. Taka grinned, as much as someone like Taka Kid, and nodded. I was very clumsy and awkward. I had very long, gangly limbs and I kept tripping over myself. I was afraid I was never going to grow into my body properly. He told her, sitting in front of her. She also sat down, hands on her ankles with the bottoms of her feet pressed together. Aki was terrible with hand signs. He could never remember the right ones and always botched his jutsus. The twins had terrible coordination with one another at the start and couldn't hit the broad side of a house with a shuriken. Even the most skilled shinobi today had trouble with something at the start, he said. He knew how important confidence could be, and as much as his sister or brothers could fake it, the truth was everyone was insecure and worried about their own strength. Even Dad? His smile faltered for a moment, but it did not disappear. Even Dad? Naruto thought for a moment before she brought up the events prior to their meeting in her apartment. Yesterday, my Genin team ran into another team from the Sand Village. They're here for the Chunin exams, she told him. Taka gave a small nod, letting her know he was listening and for her to go on. Kakashi-sensei never mentioned it to us, and I'm wondering if he doesn't think we're strong enough for it. She admitted what's been bothering her. It was something she had been barely able to admit to herself because she didn't want to believe that might be the case. It's a tough decision to make, deciding if your team is ready or not for such a test of skill. He told her, it may not be a judgment of you if he doesn't nominate your team, but of how he feels about his own teachings, he told her. It's not personal. Naruto scoffed and mumbled, I don't know about that. Do you think sensei's taught you what you need to know to face this challenge? He asked her seriously. Naruto didn't exactly answer the question, and that was his answer. I'm ready, she said with a swallow, her voice thick with determination and naive confidence. This was Naruto, his headstrong, confident sister, so sure she could kick anyone's butt. She was a mix of the twins and their mother. It was becoming more clear what qualities she shared with the rest of them despite not having grown up together. He hummed, raising an eyebrow at her, looking very unconvinced. His sister slumped and pouted at him. The childish act rose a chuckle from him. She was a lot more like Aki than he dared to tell her in fear of backlash. Don't laugh, I'm serious, she said, annoyed. I'm ready. We completed a really tough mission to the Land of Wave, fought a super badass missing nin named Zabuza and everything. Taka's tan skin turned white. Zabuza Momichi, the demon of the mist? The one and only, she said, as if proud of the man. Then she frowned, her eyes downcasting to her ankles. I was actually pretty sad when he died. I know he was the bad guy and we couldn't let him win, but he had this boy with him that I. She swallowed as if to swallow a knot. She did not finish the sentence and started a new one. His name was Haku and he had it pretty rough before Zabuza found him. Still, he was kind and he spared us. He didn't want to kill us and I didn't want to kill him. You are a very compassionate person, Naruto, he told her and clapped her shoulder. No, she shook her head. I don't think I am. There was a moment when I thought he had killed Sasuke and I wanted to hurt him, to tear Haku apart. I wanted to kill him. She remembered that hot darkness that had heated her body, the red steam that rose all around her, bubbling and moving on its own like it had been alive. And I was going to do it. I had beaten him, he could barely stand and he asked me to finish him because he thought he was no more use to Zabuza. He thought he had failed him by being beat by me and I. Did you kill him? Taka asked with no judgment. Naruto shook her head, she gripped her ankles tighter. No, she said. Haku stopped me just before I was going to do it. Zabuza was fighting Kakashi-sensei, and he was about to be killed. Haku sensed that and he stopped me because he felt that he was needed by the person he loved one more time. He gave his life to save Zabuza. It didn't matter though, Zabuza died anyway. But he took the real bad guys down with him, she told him. She had felt the burn and heaviness behind her eyes that signaled she was getting teary, but she hadn't realized she had let a tear fall until Taka had wiped it away from her cheek with a single finger. It was gruesome, Haku shouldn't have died that way. And to both their surprise, Naruto threw herself into Taka's arms and cried into his chest. She hadn't known she had this still bottled up inside her. She thought she had cried it all out that foggy day on the bridge when she shouted and screamed at Zabuza when she got to them. It hadn't been fair. Taka took in a sharp breath before relaxing, holding his sister comfortingly. He was glad this Haku had stopped her. Naruto had enough burdens on her heart. She wasn't ready yet to carry the weight of taking a life just yet. Naruto? He whispered, her voice softly. She gave a sniffle of acknowledgement. Just because there was a moment you wanted to kill Haku, doesn't make you bad, he told her, seeing through to what was really bothering her. And when he asked you to kill him and you agreed, that wasn't because you liked the idea of killing him. It wasn't, she looked up, her nose running. No, he told her softly. It was because you wanted to end the pain that you saw he was in and could feel in your very own heart. You empathized with him and made a very hard choice on what to do, he said, kissing her forehead. You are not a bad person, Naruto. In fact, I think you are a very good one, he told her with a soft smile and gentle eyes. Naruto hugged him tighter and put her face to his chest and hugged him tightly. Thanks, Taka, she whispered against him. She hadn't meant for the conversation to take the direction it did. She had only meant to give an example of the tough mission she had been on and that she was ready for more than the annoying missions they had been given as of late. There was just something about Taka where she felt it was okay to talk to him more than the others. But there were some things she doubted she would feel okay talking to him about. That made her think about her mom and even Tatsuki upstairs, who had offered to lend her an ear if she wanted to talk. Before they went upstairs, Taka found a clean rag for her to wipe her face and nose with. Aki would have a fit if she got her dress dirty with snot and be even more upset if he knew she had been crying. Mostly because she had cried to Taka and not him. What's his deal? Naruto asked Taka on the way out of the training room. Aki has always loved the role of older brother. When we lost you, it went into overdrive. We think it was his way of coping, by doting on us even more than before because he couldn't with you. He glanced down and over his shoulder at her up the creaking stairs up to the front door. Oh, said Naruto. He was really looking forward to being an older brother to a baby sister. Some kids dream of being a hero, a strong ninja or great entrepreneurs. Naruto didn't know what that last word meant. Aki dreamed of being the best big brother there could be, he said just before opening the door for her. Their conversation ended there, not wanting Aki to hear they were talking about him. The twins just finished and Asa-san is in the bath. She went in a little while ago so she should be getting out soon. Aki called to Taka without leaving his place in the kitchen. The smell that continued to permeate the air was so delicious and savory that Naruto felt lightheaded. Taka gave a grunt of acknowledgement and went upstairs to get out a clean pair of clothes for when it was his turn to bathe. Naruto looked up at the ceiling and suddenly wondered if any of them had gone into their parents' room to clean it. It still felt like an off-limits place to her for a number of reasons. She thought that was how most kids were supposed to feel, that a parent's room was a private domain you shouldn't enter unless it was to run in after a nightmare or something. She wasn't 100% sure how it all worked. The only knowledge of the relationship between parent and child is what she saw on the streets, playground or on television. Sometimes she might catch a glimpse through a window at a family dinner where everyone was smiling and talking about their day. Is that what they were going to do? Sit down to dinner and get to know each other and share stories? Naruto wondered briefly, trying to imagine it, and could admit it wasn't a bad picture at all. They had a pretty good time together cleaning the house, so dinner couldn't be that bad. These guys were really starting to grow on her. They were fun to be around. It was still weird, but it was getting less so being around them. Naruto-chan, are you okay? Naruto blinked and looked at Tatsuki, who was cuddled up on the couch with Miki. Her head was on his shoulder and they looked so intimate and cozy Naruto couldn't help but blush. Yeah, sorry, I was just thinking, she told the older girl. Sit with us, Naruto, Nikki spoke up, trying to break the tension as he patted the seat next to him. He was sitting on the opposite couch. Okay, she agreed pretty quickly. Man, I'm beat, Naruto said, stretching her arms up above her head, back arching. She then lifted her legs and put her heels on the edge of the table in the middle, putting one leg over the other. She was not very ladylike, but no one judged her for it or mentioned it, though she caught Tatsuki smiling a little. Yeah, I can't wait for dinner to be ready. After all that work I'm starving. Nikki agreed beside her, following her example of stretching out. Both twins had bathed and changed into simple shorts and shirts, all ready to spend the rest of night inside relaxing. Naruto wasn't sure where they had gotten the clothes. Any that had been left in the house would be way too small on them. But looking closely she saw that the clothes were pretty baggy. She had an inkling where they had gotten the clothes. They must be their dad's. When Asa-sensei came downstairs she was wearing the same clothes as before. Naruto supposed Asa had argued she wouldn't take their mother's clothing. They were probably leaving after dinner so they would have clothes back at their inn. Naruto did notice that neither of their clothes seemed to hold any negative scent from the earlier work or looked dirty at all. Naruto didn't think about it too much. She had the feeling if she did she was only going to give herself a headache. Sometimes it was just better to accept the cool things in life without asking for an explanation. I'll get some more tea, Asa-sensei offered when she could only pour herself half a cup before the pot was dry. Thank you. The lot of them called out to the older woman as she retreated to the kitchen to make more tea for them all. Naruto could hear Asa offer her assistance to Aki. There was brief, calm argument between the two before Asa managed to convince Aki to let her finish up for him while he took his turn to shower. Aki entered the room with a new tray of fresh hot tea and some milk for Naruto. The group of them watched whatever the twins had put on the television. Naruto let out a loud laugh along with her brothers as a man on TV went to take a drink from a fountain and it sprayed him with the force of a hose. That was funny, but it was one-upped when the guy still tried to take a drink from the 7 feet powerful spray. They continued to watch the silly game show until Asa called them to help set the table. The four of them jumped from the couches and hurried to dining room connected to the kitchen and living room. They took the plates and bowls that Asa handed them and put them in a place at the table. They went back for the other plates and put them anywhere. The long table had plenty of room and they lined up the food in the center. Aki had picked up some ramune and the kids picked out their favorite flavor to have with dinner. The shalapan steak don was in a huge donburi bowl in the middle of the table. The large pieces of sirloin marinated in red wine, soy sauce and butter was set atop white rice. Atop the steak was a heavy topping of finely chopped and fried spring onions and umeboshi. There was plenty for everyone. Next to the shalapan was a helping of mushroom and tofu soup to go with the main course and a healthy side of seasoned greens. We wait for Taka and Aki-sama. Asa sensei reminded them of their manners as they sat, staring hungrily at the feast before them. Asa sensei was very respectful, like a kind but strict mother or auntie. Naruto wondered if her own mother was anything like Asa sensei and if this was what she should expect. Maybe all women from the Edi village were as proper as Tatsuki and Asa. But Naruto couldn't imagine her mom like that. After all, Aki said she was like her mom and Naruto was far from proper. They put covers over the food to keep it hot while they waited for Taka and Aki. Taka came down first, smelling like mint and in clean clothes that looked too short on his tall body. Aki didn't take much time, and when he came into the dining room his hair was still wet. Clearly, he had rushed himself and Asa scolded him for it. Aki looked at the seats at the end of the table before he took a seat across the table from Naruto. The table was long enough for them all to sit along its sides. "Does anyone need a drink before we start?" Aki asked them all. "We're all fine, Aki-sama," Asa told him. The kids had their ramune, Taka had made himself some iced green tea, Asa had water and Aki had the same. "Good," he grinned before putting his hands together. Everyone followed suit and together they said, "Itadakimasu." They helped one another make their portions. Naruto took a bite of the tender meat and moaned at the taste. It practically melted like butter on her tongue. Burst of flavor popped in her mouth. She took another bite with a scoop of the rice and onion. The assault was incredible and so mouthwatering. She couldn't help but scarf down more. The group laughed at her appetite but did not scold her for wanting more. Aki happily scooped more meat and rice into her bowl. It made him smile to see that she enjoyed the food that he had made. "I never had meat so tender," she said with a mouth full. "It's not polite to speak with your mouth full, Naruto-san." Asa sensei scolded her gently. Naruto blushed, closed her mouth, chewed and swallowed. "Sorry," she muttered. "That's all right, just be mindful of your manners." The older woman smiled patiently. "Taka, where are your students tonight if they are not here with you?" Asa turned her attention to the second eldest. "They're at an inn. I gave them funds for meals," he said without further explanation. Asa sensei raised an eyebrow. She looked at him with some disapproval but did not speak up on it. "You have a genin team too, Taka?" Naruto asked, making sure to swallow what she had in her mouth first this time. "You're so young though. I am only a temporary team leader," he said before taking a sip of his soup. "Though I am a junin." Asa gave a sympathetic sigh. "That's right, poor Sango suddenly got so sick before we were meant to depart the village." "Why did you bring so many teams?" Naruto looked at her brothers. Hadn't they just come to see if she was the real deal? "They are both here to take part in the Chunin exams," Asa explained. The Azukage thought it the best way to make a public re-entrance among ninja with the other villages. "You guys too?" Naruto looked at the twins. "Yep," they said looking confident and excited. "Oh," Naruto said, not feeling so hungry anymore. She was thinking about how Kakashi-sensei hadn't told them about the Chunin exams. She wasn't even sure when they started. "Well, you don't have to worry about any of that, Naruto. You still have a while before you have to take the exams." He grinned and took a bite of his food. "You'll be safe at home or on a low-rank mission with your team during the exams," said Aki, sounding much too sure and happy about it. Naruto wasn't happy about that at all. She wanted to take the Chunin exams. Asa continued speaking to Taka. "But why didn't you invite your team, Taka-san? It seems rather mean not to include them after you welcomed us so warmly," she asked him with a frown. He hummed thoughtfully as if that was his answer. Strangely enough, Asa seemed to understand. "Well, I do suppose they can be a rather excitable trio. They are not as easy to calm themselves as Tatsuki. It might have been uncomfortable for Naruto-san," said Asa speaking of Tatsuki and Naruto's meeting earlier. Naruto had no idea what they were going on about. "They're not that bad, they just take their duty very seriously. Sango-sensei's been beating it into them since we found out about Naruto," said Aki to their defense. "I wouldn't mind having them over," he admitted before taking a drink. Taka frowned. "After the Chunin exams, we can all have dinner together. They need to focus right now." They ended it at that. The twins started the next conversation by recapping the show they had been watching earlier, earning laughs from the table as they retold the pranks and how inspired they were. Aki gave them a glare of warning. She doubted that would sway them though as she gave her thoughts on how to better improve their schemes. Aki let out a wail of a whine as she joined in on the best way to mess with their dear eldest brother. At one point Tatsuki asked Naruto about the things she liked. Ramen, plants, training. I like animals but they don't seem to like me all too much. She said the last part with a shrug. I also like fishing. Naruto went on. Tatsuki listened and smiled. She hadn't doubted it before, but Naruto was what people called quite a tomboy. But that was not bad. Not all girls were meant to be the same. That would be incredibly boring, in Tatsuki's opinion. After dinner, the younger ones were in charge of clearing the table and cleaning the dishes. Aki could hear them talk and laugh about a number of things as he sat with Taka and Asa in the living room, a fresh pot of tea on the table in front of them. Eventually, Asa took note of how dark it was getting outside through the window. It's time for us to leave, Tatsuki. Asa announced when the kids came out from the kitchen. Tatsuki gave an obedient nod and turned to give Nikki and Miki a hug, and then she also embraced Naruto. Today was so much fun. I am very happy to have met you, Naruto-chan. Tatsuki said in her ear before pulling away and taking 2 steps back. I hope we can hang out again sometime. Maybe just the 2 of us? Tatsuki asked. Sure. Naruto gave a half-hearted reply. But Tatsuki thought that was more because she was shy rather than because she was disinterested. Great, I'll see you soon. She said to everyone and waved goodbye. I'll walk you out. Miki offered, quickly trailing after Tatsuki and disappearing into the entrance hall. I will give your instructions to your team, Taka-san. The other sensei said to him. Though I really think you should make sure to visit them before the exams. She bowed to both him and Aki. Thank you for the meal and hospitality. You're welcome anytime. Aki offered, also walking her to the door, as was polite. His grandmother made sure to help raise a gentleman. Naruto was startled when Taka let out a yawn that sounded like a lion's roar. The twins didn't blink at it, whereas Naruto had practically jumped with surprise. Their older brother's yawn was contagious and the twins gave their own, which sounded like they came from kittens in comparison. We should get the futons out. They both said, moving together towards the closest they had to store them in earlier. Naruto couldn't help it and let out her own loud, almost obnoxious yawn. She helped her brothers push the couches to the sides, moved the table in the center to make room. Their futons barely had any space between them. The twins and Naruto were quick to collapse back on their backs, still feeling like they could stay up for hours, but in truth the moment they laid fully back they started to doze off. Aki must have been talking to Asa-sensei longer than he thought, because when he came back inside he found his siblings sprawled across the futons, snoring. That's all for now. If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments.